Welcome to Not Quite Right. My name's Ed.
And I'm Amanda.
We got a really long episode today.
Woohoo!
So hang in there.
Might be a little bit slap happy by the end of it, but that's
so.
all right. A bit punch drunk, if you will.
If you will. Well, we'll talk about punch drunk later. That's a whole thing.
It is.
So this is the Longlist episode.
It's the long
episode.
list.
So we're going to have quite a bit to talk about today. We're going to go through the stats from the comp. We're going to go through questions that some of you had for us. We'll be shouting out some stories and talking about what we found in the comp, what we liked.
The clever ideas that we saw. Just bear in mind, though, if we shout you out, that doesn't necessarily mean you made the long list. So we'll be announcing the long list right at the end of the episode. So shout outs, that's just to acknowledge something that we liked. But yeah, stick around till the end or skip ahead if you've got no patience whatsoever. But we hope you'll come back and listen because there should be some enlightening stuff in here.
Absolutely. We'll be going a little bit deeper into the anti-prompt and the other two prompts.
It should be a really interesting chat because I know a lot of people are still wondering exactly what is this anti-prompt thing. So if you are wondering about that, or even if you're just wondering how other people handled that, we'll definitely be going through some of the interesting takes on the anti-prompt in this episode.
And at the end of the show, we'll be reading the long list, and we'll also be reading our 2 Daredevil stories as well and talking about them. So even if you're not one of the 2 that submitted that story, there's definitely a lot to learn from listening to our feedback.
Absolutely. We'll try not to be too cruel to our poor daredevils. They're quite brave putting themselves out there because it's hard. It's hard to take critique on something you've worked hard on. So we'll be gentle, but not too gentle.
Not too gentle. And thanks to everyone who entered the competition. We had a great time. We were super happy at the number of entries we got and the quality of the entries. And we've decided that we're going to keep doing this every 3 months, basically.
Yeah. Yep, I'm excited. And all the feedback we've got, it's been so positive. Everybody's having such a great time with the anti-prompt. Even when they hate it, they love it. And so, we've decided to make this a regular thing. And we hope you'll join us when you can along the way.
And so by the time this episode goes out, you'll be able to sign up for the next comp, which is going to be running in April.
Yep. And what's great is that people who are in on the ground floor, starting in this comp now, you have the advantage of sort of learning as you go, learning about the anti-prompt, learning about how this comp works and what gets our attention. And hopefully that'll give you an advantage as the comps go forward as well.
Yeah. So with that all said, let's get to this comp. How many entries did we get?
We got 257 entries. That's of about 310 people who bought tickets. So there was a few who hit that writer's block wall, including one of our daredevils. And so it's about 83% of people actually delivered their story. So if you did submit a story, whether you make the long list or not today, pat yourself on the back because it is hard. It is hard. We've all been there when life gets in the way or there's just a block. So congrats already if you actually submitted an entry. If you didn't submit on time, but you purchased a critique package, you can still send it through. There's a little bit of time to get that to us to still get your critique. So consider doing that if you did miss the deadline.
So we had about, 40-something people sign up for the critique package?
More than that, I think.
Yeah, quite a lot.
Yeah.
Which is great. We totally encouraged it. But now we have a ton of work to do to write critiques for those. And I think I calculated, and it's going to be like a week of full-time work for each of us. I'm looking forward to doing it, but we have discussed it amongst ourselves, and I don't think it's going to be feasible and sustainable to keep doing this volume of critiques. So next time around, we'll probably have to tweak a few things. We might have a higher price, or we might have a cutoff, essentially a set number of critiques that we'll offer that we can definitely do.
Yeah, we want to still do it because we can see the value in it. We just need to find that happy balance there.
Yeah.
All right, now, here come the stats. So, like I said, 257 entries from 23 countries. And I'm sure you can guess the most prevalent country.
It's got to be Australia.
Yay. Yeah. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
And the US.
Don't leave me hanging on my Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Oi, oi, oi.
Thank you. So 102 Aussies, 70 Yanks, 29 Brits, Poms, if you will, 17. Do we have a derogatory term for Canadians?
Is it Canucks?
No, that's like...
Oh, it doesn't have to be derogatory.
Yeah, well,
Vaguely sounds bad.
It does a little, doesn't it? It's a rhyming slang.
It rhymes with something, yeah.
And then we've got some Germans, New Zealanders, a couple from Ireland, Japan, Philippines. And shout out to our individual entrants from Belgium, Bulgaria, Chile, France, India, Italy, Korea, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Poland, Samoa, Singapore, Spain, and Sweden. Hello. Was that deeply offensive too? I apologise. We love you all. And of course, once again, the females have it. We've got 157 women who entered, 73 men. We had 7 people who identified as non-binary.
Yeah, so females outnumbering males by more than 2 to 1 in those stats, which is expected, I guess, but is still higher than I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, what was it last time? Wasn't it around 70% or something?
Yeah, it wasn't quite as high last time.
It's the Barbie movie. It's motivated us all.
Right. Men are too busy beaching.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so with the age breakdowns, we had people from every age bracket. But our most prevalent age bracket was the 30 to 45 category, which we are too. So that makes sense.
Me just barely these days.
Scraping through by the skin of your old teeth there. So there was 102 people from that category. Next most prevalent category was the next one. So that's you soon. 45 to 60, there was 72 of you there. And then 18 to 30 came next at 43 entrants, 24 60 plus. And 16 under 18s. So hi to all the young ones. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. The total number of words, title and story that we had to read was 125,778 words. That's roughly a Jane Austen novel, like a Sense and Sensibility or a Pride and Prejudice. So pretty decent. And there were 3 entries that had to be excluded, unfortunately. So one was disqualified for not using the word punch, which never ceases to amaze me, but I can see how that would happen. One unfortunately missed out on an honourable mention. Like, they stayed in the comp, but we just couldn't quite bring ourselves to give them an honourable mention because they didn't quite clearly hit the anti-prompt and it didn't feel fair. So unfortunately that person missed out. And then one person was disqualified. This is my platonic life partner, Pat, and unfortunately she could not help herself and she had to roast me in her story. So I had to disqualify her purely for that.
And maybe this is a good time to remind people, let people know, just be careful what you put in that brief explanation field.
Yeah, this wasn't in the brief explanation field. This was hardcore roasting me about an incident that happened when we were like 13. Very blatantly. I think she ruled herself out of the running pretty quickly on that one. But yes, do be careful. All right, so these are the stats that I really find interesting as a comp entrant myself. So 30 stories were submitted in the last hour of the comp, and 2 were submitted in, well, an extra 2, I should say, was submitted in the last minute, dead on midnight, basically. And shout out to the 3 stories that scraped in over the deadline. We, as we mentioned previously to the entrants, that we would allow the form to remain open. If you're already in the form by midnight, the form stayed open for a few minutes, and so 3 people scraped in there.
You are playing it pretty fine, though, if you do that.
Oh, you're really cutting it fine. And I will say, one of the very, very late entries made the shortlist.
Oh, I didn't know that, actually.
So, you know, those extra few seconds might have counted for something. The earliest story we received was within 4 hours. So that's slow compared to last time. And last time
it was 11 minutes from memory, which, I mean, you've got to know that it wasn't written for the comp or it was ChatGPT.
So this earliest story, again, it did not make the long list, this one. The earliest story to make the long list was submitted on the first day within 5 hours, so not long later. So someone really smashed it out. Well done to type so fast and write so fast and still make the long list. That's pretty impressive. Our shortest entry was just 139 words. That was An Enemy's Encouragement by Alexandra Sophia. So that's short and sweet. And the longest title was 13 words. And that was You Can't Keep a Good Man Down on the Farm in the Cotswolds by Gail Martin. Just quickly to take the opportunity to say, I hope I've gotten everyone's names right because I was cross-referencing our spreadsheet quite a lot. So deepest and sincerest apologies if I get it wrong, but I did do my best. I did try. Now here comes the fun one, and this is the one that you might want to skip ahead through if you've got kids in the car or whatever, but it's our swearing stats. Hooray! So I'll ask you, which word do you think was the most frequently used swear word in this comp?
I will say, before I answer that question, I did get the impression that the swearing was toned down a fair bit.
It was toned down a little bit.
Comp, which was because you made a big point on the podcast to say we encourage swearing, so people really let it rip. But this time around, it was much more subdued. I would have to say fuck
Well done. Yes. So we had fuck, motherfucking, fuckwit, a few different iterations there. There were 64 of those. So
okay, that's not much.
Very few compared to last time.
Less than half.
Yeah. And next, should be easy to guess.
Oh, maybe shit.
Yes, it was shit. So shits of all kinds. We had 57 of those. 3 of them were holy. So we've had a few beatifications there.
Pope would be proud.
Oh, he'd be so proud. He'd be shit proud, if you will.
To use a cliche.
Yikes, to put words in his mouth. But interestingly, those stats were flipped last time, and I was surprised to see that shit was less than fuck because it's more frequently used typically. So people were just going real hard this time. If they were going to do it, they were going to go
You've only got
hard.
500 words. You've got to make an impression.
And then we had a few others. So we had arse, and holes thereof. There were 17 of those. 8 piss, 7 bastards.
There was a bit of piss.
There was a bit of piss. Bit of spilled piss here and there.
Yeah, that's true. That's
there was some spilled shit, actually. There's a couple of buckets of shit. There were 5 bitches or sons thereof, 3 dicks, 2 of which were punched.
That's right. Yeah.
So look out. Once again, no vaginas. So consider this your challenge for next time. I mean, again, even the Barbie movie can manage that. So come on. We had 1 cocksucker, no pricks this time, 0 C-bombs. Of course, in Australia, that's a term of endearment. So just a quick shout out to Nikki Marsh with Sibling Rivalry. I was just wondering, have you been to one of my family Christmases? And I just wasn't aware because the story was about board games and competitiveness, which just reeks of my family. And they had this game they made up where they had to keep saying cliches. So it's an interesting take on the anti-prompt. And I'm pretty sure cliches and puns over MSN Messenger was how I got Andy to fall in love with me. So that story certainly spoke to me.
And you've got some questions from social media.
Yeah, we had some really great questions from our entrants and listeners about the judging process and different things about the comp. So we'd like to go through some of those now. And there were quite a few, but I think it's worth going through them all because they're really good. We had Nicholas Marconi on Twitter ask, what are some things you find frustrating about the judging of other competitions that you still find yourself doing as judges, whether out of necessity or as a byproduct of the overall process?
Number 1 on my list is how long it takes for the results to be published.
100%. And we had a few people sort of, guys,
yeah,
why is it taking so long?
I remember sitting there just saying, why are they taking 5 weeks to publish results? Come on.
It's 500 words, guys.
Yeah. How long does it take you to read Pride and Prejudice?
Yeah, exactly.
But we've also then got to grade them, work out which ones are our favourites, talk between each other, work out what we agree on, what we don't agree on, and it's a back and forth process. And then we've got to record the podcast, and we've got to edit the podcast, and then we've got to write the blog post.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of admin.
Email.
There's a lot to do behind the scenes, and certainly we don't like to drag it out. We probably could do it a little bit quicker, but I think we want to do it properly. I don't think either of us want to rush through this. It's important to us. We acknowledge the time and effort people put in, so we want to give it the time and effort to judge it properly. But I agree. I wish it was quicker. I would say as well, something that annoys me is the plain text form. This was something we talked about at length when we first started the comp about, I need italics or bold and what's the deal with the line breaks? And it is a bit annoying. And it's, if you're anxious, anal sort of person like me, you're just starting to think, well, how's this getting perceived on the other end? Is my line breaks right? Is it going to look a bit off? And I know too that some writers use some of those formatting things sort of creatively to lay out their story, which can be useful depending on what you're doing. So I guess that's annoying and it's something that we do. And again, there's a reason.
Yeah, so this time around we had an option to use a rich text form where you can format, but the limitation of the form and the plugin was that it would not count your words. It could only count characters. And we just felt that having that 500 word cutoff and being sure about how many words you put in was far more important because counting words can be different depending on which piece of software you're using.
Exactly. You want to keep that
about it. And you want to make sure that that is accurate and true. It is something that we're continuing to look at, and maybe there are other options we can do to make that word count part of the submission process as well with the italics and the formatting too. It's just, we'll slowly improve it.
Well, we'll think about it. I mean, to be honest, reflecting back on it, I was happy that all the stories were consistently formatted because I think it could become a distraction, and I think in the wrong ways. So I think while some people might want to use formatting to create a certain look, more often than not it would cause problems and you would end up with stories that had funky formatting problems that ended up sort of harming them. So I don't think it's such a bad thing that they come out consistent. And at the moment, it is what it is. We did allow for people to manually indicate, I guess, that they wanted italics or bold. And we honoured that when we're reading the stories. So that sort of solves most of the problem.
Yeah, and we didn't have any problems with the formatting that came through. I think I saw one comment in the brief explanation field from the story saying, I'm not sure if the formatting went through, like my line breaks are not showing up properly. But when it came through, it all looked good.
Fine.
So
yeah, but it is a bit confusing and a bit anxiety provoking on the other end. We've created a quite extensive detailed post now about how to format your entry, which will be available to entrants going forward. So hopefully that resolves some of those anxieties. But back to Nicholas's question, I guess the other thing that I don't like about other competitions that we do is charge a fee.
Yep.
So why do we charge a fee?
Well, it's for our work.
Yeah.
We put a lot of work into this, hundreds, thousands of hours into the website, into the podcast, into the editing, into reading, critiquing. It's all a ton of work that we do.
Yeah, and it would be unsustainable, completely unsustainable, because we do have day jobs to maintain this without offsetting some of the costs. And we do have actually costs ourselves as well of running this stuff. So, but, it is what it is. And I know that the people who enter the comps see the value, as I do when I pay to enter comps. It's not for everyone. I know it's not in everyone's budget, and that's unfortunate. But fortunately, there are free competitions around. They're usually hosted by like an educational institution or sponsored by a company that's promoting a product, and they're free to enter. So, that option is there for people who don't have that in their budget. One thing that really frustrates me when I enter a competition is when I get judged and you might get some feedback and you just think, they didn't get it. They didn't get what I was trying to say. And guess what? I didn't always get what our entrants were trying to say. And I could see that. There were times when I thought, I'm not picking up what you're putting down here. Yeah. And that's tough. Like, I don't like that. It is what it is. And I guess I've come to the realization in my own writing that it's up to me to be clear.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson in trying to find a better balance sometimes of that air of mystery versus clarity in a very brief story, sometimes briefer than this too.
Because you can get stuck in your own head when you're writing and you've got the idea, you know what the idea is, and you're sitting there reworking it, and it's not until someone else sees it that you realise that you haven't actually said the things that are in your head, or haven't really painted the picture completely for the reader. Yeah,
haven't quite joined the dots. And that's why it is so important, and we really strongly encourage people to get a beta reader, because it's really important to have someone pick that up for you. We do that for each other when we're entering comps, like, I didn't quite get this, or who's this guy all of a sudden, and it's stuff that as the author you just cannot pick up because your brain doesn't tell you there's a gap there. And that's what our forum's for. And it was really lovely to see, actually, when I logged back onto the forum after we decided the winner, to see that people were doing that for each other. So Alice or Elise Killick on Twitter said, I feel like the problem is with the word count, not the genre. You can write a brilliant story in 1,500 words, but it'll be overlooked because it doesn't meet the word count. Is it fair that it's more about word count than quality?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I mean, the reason we have a word count is to keep it fair. Otherwise, if we just said open and then someone submits a 1,500 word story or a 3,500 word story, it's going to be perceived very differently to something that is 500 words. Yeah,
there needs to be some sort of standardization to be able to compare. But I guess I disagree that it's more about word count. We don't make it about word count. Like, it is a flash fiction competition. Although, yes, it's probably the strictest rule that we have. I don't really think that's what it's about. I think it's about the story, ultimately. And not every story is a flash fiction story, and this is something that we can get into a bit later as well. But it's part of the challenge of flash fiction to be concise. That's what this competition is. This is not a novel competition. It's being concise, being evocative in a very brief period of time. And that is a special challenge.
Yeah, I think that's also something that we spoke about on the last Longlist episode. There were a lot of stories that try to bite off more than they can chew in terms of a story and really try to tell a whole arc, someone's life, or something along those lines. And there's just not enough time.
No,
you cannot build your character. You cannot get invested in anything emotionally if you're just hitting beats across a longer story. And so, tell a small part of that story.
And this is something we've provided, advice on the website and elsewhere, just about how to really narrow your focus to really get the most out of flash fiction. So that's our view on it. Not everyone would agree. So feel free to jump on social media and let us know what you think about the word count. So moving on, we have Wesley Zurovec on Twitter. How do you prevent genre bias when judging? I.e., are there specific genres you are naturally drawn to or repelled by? And if so, how do you keep things even?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question because I think for me there are certain genres I'm drawn to and repelled by.
Of course.
But they're not necessarily the same genres as I am in generally drawn to or repelled by, because there are things that work much better in flash fiction than other places, and there are things that I enjoy in movies or in other books that I just don't think work as well in flash fiction. And a couple of those genres are fantasy and sci-fi, and for similar but different reasons, because for sci-fi you really need time to set up world building. You need to establish what are the rules of the world you're in and what is the kind of the concept that you're trying to drive home.
And it's not even about having to do that. That's why people read fantasy. Yeah. Like, that's the joy of fantasy. Makes it good. Yeah. Whereas if without that, what's left?
And so the trap you can fall into, because you just don't have that time, is to tell quite a cliched story. Something that is very generic, like a generic fantasy story. There's a knight and he's in a battle, and that's the story. Flash fiction is much more suited towards human stories where the setting is real world, I find, because you don't have to explain things.
Yeah, you jump straight in. I agree. But look, that's not to say it can't be done. And Wesley's question is, the implied question beneath it is, are you going to judge me harshly if you don't like the type of story that I like? And I don't think so. No. I mean, I really don't. I think that we judge a story on its merits. And I mean, I don't particularly like fantasy or sci-fi at all. Like, that's not my genre. That's not to say I haven't enjoyed watching Lord of the Rings and stuff, but it's not a genre that I enjoy. However, I can appreciate and acknowledge when it's done well.
Yeah.
And so if we saw a story come through and it was a flash fiction piece and it did effectively convey meaning, evoked emotion, or did what it needed to do to otherwise be really effective as flash fiction, then for sure it would get through. So it's not a bias in the sense that we just don't like it and we're going to just toss it to the side. It's absolutely a case of how it's executed. And as you've indicated, like, it's just a lot harder to execute some types of stories. And I would add to the sci-fi and fantasy genre stories, like detective stories, some romances. And when I say romance, I don't mean a romantic story, because there are plenty of those that work well in flash. Love is perfectly interesting emotion to convey. I'm talking like genre romance, the tropes. And again, this is why people read and love romance stories, the tropes. They love it. Myself included, when I read romance. And it's not the same in flash, because those tropes become, and we'll talk about cliches, but they become cliche and it feels too generic.
Yeah.
Or it can feel too generic. And when it does, it's not effective as flash. Again, that's not to say a romance wouldn't make it through. Our winner last time was a romantic story, but it delivered as a piece of flash.
I mean, think about it as the difference between a full-length movie that you're watching as opposed to a short film. And if you just take 10 minutes out of your favorite movie and put that in a short film, you're just not going to get anything like the impact that you need out of it, because you're missing all of the other context and the characters. So you can't just take a snippet of something bigger and say that's a story. You need to really tune it for the format.
That's it. And I think important to remember too that it's a competition. So if you're producing something that has a bit of a generic or vanilla sort of flavor to it, like something that's very palatable, like we're all going to go see it at the movies because it's a good movie, but it's not special, well then how are you going to stand out against the competition with something that's just good?
Yeah.
What we always say is, please write what you want to write. We're not here to by any means try and persuade people to write what we think is good, because we are constantly pleasantly surprised by the entries that we get and the way that people are able to sway us into things that we didn't even know we wanted. So if you love writing fantasy, by all means, write your fantasy. Just make sure that you are also delivering an effective piece of flash fiction. That's our challenge to you.
Yeah.
So next question was from Greg Schmidt on Twitter, whose name I very much remember.
Yes, me too.
From the last comp. And Greg asked, have you ever had a story that one of you loves but the other just hates? Does a story always need both judges' approval to stay?
I can't think of any that one of us was dead set on but didn't make the cut.
No, not this time. No,
it's always just because we have to draw the line somewhere.
Yep.
And there's people who are going to be just below the line, and that's always going to happen. It's a different story, I guess, when we go into the short list, because I think this time around we agreed pretty closely on which 6
Yeah.
were going to be in the shortlist. I think there were 1 or 2 that I liked more and that you liked more.
But we both
And-
agreed they were close. Like
But it
they
was
weren't sort of
close.
way off.
Yeah, that's right. And we negotiate the order and try to work out where things sit. And I think that's one of the good things about having the wildcards that we brought in this year, because that does give us an opportunity. Wildcards are open for us. We can choose them for whatever we like, and there's 2, so we can be 1 each if we wanted. They're entries that didn't make the shortlist, but we can call them out. So if there is one that I feel really strongly about,
And I feel really strongly against.
that you hate, I can say, well, no, that's going to be my wildcard entry. So we do have a way around that. But I think we tend to agree, even though we have different tastes, we do tend to agree on at least quality-wise which stories belong in the top.
It's pretty organic, I have to say, pretty organic process for us with the judging, because it's the 2 of us at the moment. We have the luxury of being able to judge it in sort of a fluid way. So it's like based on what we get instead of having a really fixed agenda about what that's going to be, because, we want creativity. So we have to be flexible to reward that when it comes in.
Yeah, I think last time the long list decision was a lot easier than this time. I think there were only a couple that we were not sure about. And I think the quality of the stories was much closer this time around. Like, most of the stories were in the middle of the pack.
Yeah,
they were really close together in quality.
Not too many outliers.
Not too many
and-
outliers either, top or bottom. So it was really difficult just to draw that line at the long list this time around. And so if you did miss out on the long list, it's probably you weren't too far off.
Yeah, it's a good point, because I know it's disappointing when you hear, you didn't make the long list. Like, we're all sensitive, this is our creativity, sometimes our identity on the line when we're talking about our stories. It's like I'm putting myself out there and getting rejected. And I just want to say, like, this is absolutely not a rejection. Everybody did amazing. And, I wish we could have everyone on the long list, but I hope that no one goes away thinking, oh, well, I'm just never going to write again. Because absolutely would not be saying that to any of you. You should all be writing and you should all continue. And hopefully the stuff we go through shortly will give you some inspiration for next time to level up again if you didn't make the list. But I guess it flows on to Nina's question, Nina Miller on Twitter, who asked, do you really read each one through? Have you ever read a bad opening paragraph and just said, nope, not going to read, and stopped?
So yes, we do read each one through.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely
Every
make
word.
sure to give them the time. I know how much time is spent on this. And actually, we both just entered Furious Fiction.
We did.
Last month as well. So I've just written a 500-word story last weekend. So I know how much time you spent agonizing over each word and getting that story just right. So we want to be absolutely fair and give everyone the time and make sure that we're reading everyone all the way through. Would never just give up at the first.
I will say, though, there are certainly ones where I read the opening sentence and I go, oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
you definitely have to work hard to win us back
Sometimes,
after
to recover. But absolutely would read every word that follows. And guess what? Plenty of stories do recover.
Yeah.
And by the last word, you're like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
So we give everyone the time of day. But by the same token, that opening sentence is very important. So don't be overlooking that. So Mary Rose Sapphire on Instagram asked, what are the deal breakers or makers when it comes to finalising the long list? And how important is the ending?
Yeah, so like you've said, it is organic and we don't have a strict set of requirements that we tick off, but we both have some things that we're looking for. So the technical quality of the writing is important.
Yeah, but, we have seen stories make it through the long list that technically weren't as good as others.
Yes.
Because that's not the only
It's
thing
not the
they've
only
been.
thing.
And in fact, it's very important, but it's not the most important thing.
Yeah. For me personally, it's quite emotional. Like
Yes.
you get to the end of the story. How do you feel about it?
It's the vibe, baby.
It's the vibe. Do you feel like you've been affected by the story emotionally? It doesn't have to be emotionally as in sad or anything like that. But did you get something out of it? Did it leave you with something? Did it leave you with a mark? Or did you get to the end of the story and you went, okay.
Yeah, and something can be very technically proficient and still leave you with a meh at the end.
Yeah, so originality, the story itself, and also the prompts.
Yeah, I think originality and cleverness can get you a long way. In fact, probably further than technical proficiency, provided, you're still up there. But bringing something fresh, because that automatically evokes a reaction in someone because we're like, ooh, this is different, so that's going to get you somewhere. And a really effective way to do that in this comp and probably in others is to have a creative take on the prompts because we see that. It's impressive.
So those are the deal makers. In terms of deal breakers, there are definitely things that can lower the story below the level it needs to be. Some of those things are unpolished prose, cliched situations, which I know is challenging this time in this comp, but often, like, if you just read the story and you know you've read it before or you've seen it before, underdeveloped characters, which is a problem, I think, with lots of writing, is just that lacking that focus on characters.
And that's something we've gone into detail about before, and we'll keep hammering it because I really think if you take anything away from this episode, character.
And finally, a poor ending.
Yeah.
That can really
sink the ship. I would much rather a weak beginning than a weak ending.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's what we're left with, because that's how we judge it, because we do read every word. It's how it ends. And I know for myself, I find it really hard to end flash fiction without being cliche, because there often is just, you've got to wrap it up so quick. You don't get to do it in a super unique and original way a lot of the time. And you're not necessarily looking for a twist. So how can you end it and make it feel satisfying? But it is important, super important. That probably leads on to the next question, which is from Dean Clory on Twitter. And he asked, are there any particular things that instantly endanger an entry, like blatant typos, POV errors, overuse of exclamations, etc.?
Not instantly, I think. Again, it is about the vibe, and you get to the end of the story and you can overlook some problems. But often those are deal breakers when you're talking about the short list or trying to get to the top of the heap. Those are all things that you should look at fixing.
No, that's it. And just jumping back to the previous question too, it links in. Something that for me would get you off the long list is if I don't get it.
Yeah.
If I read it and I read it again and I read it a third time and I go, I don't know what's happening here.
Yep.
This is a mess. That's a deal breaker for sure. That's something that endangers your story. But like the little stuff, like do you use exclamation? Like we have our own little quirks and preferences, things that piss us off. Like Ed hates ellipses. I love an ellipsis.
I'm not going to mark anyone down for using them. It's valid.
Exactly.
I just have a problem.
But they're loud to you, right? They're loud.
I have a problem with them when they're overused.
Yeah, right. Really. Which I'm guilty of. And I like an exclamation mark. I mean, no problems there. But I have a little pet peeve of people describing hair color and eye color. And it's completely stupid, and I do it myself in my own writing. But sometimes that's really loud to me as well. But, that's not going to get you off the list. This is not our little ego trip where we just, no, you mustn't. There's a right way and a wrong way. So Dean went on to ask, how important do you think the first and final paragraphs or sentences are?
Yeah, very important.
Vital.
Yeah. It's not going to make or break your story, but if you can make the first sentence really good, then it gets your attention.
You've done a lot of the work in getting us on your side, basically.
I'm into it, and I really want to know what happens next, and I'm really hoping this story is going to be great from the outset.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But then if you do that and don't deliver on the final sentence, it can actually be kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
So again, I think the final sentence is vitally important. You could get through on a pretty stock standard opening or closing. It's not like you have to wow every time. You can deliver stuff in a pretty straightforward way. It doesn't need to be some like super evocative, crazy like purple prose or anything. Yeah. It just needs to be what it needs to be in your story and leave the judges satisfied in the ending. Like, that was good. Or I felt a thing, or I thought it made me think, So super important. So the final part of Dean's question was, how important is the title? For example, a story with a great twist, but the twist is revealed in the title. Oh, that's like the holy grail.
I think we probably disagree on this because I don't think the title is that important at all. Like, I read the title and then I read the story and I don't dwell on the title. Sometimes I come back to it and go, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. But for me, it's if you've got a great story, I don't care what the title is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to me in Flash, the title is a huge part of your story and you should take it seriously. Mm-hmm. It can be used in many, many different ways. You could really, for example, quickly set up and establish a lot with your title. Like, I already know where we are or when we are or what to expect of this story before it even begins. So I'm already sort of primed before I started reading the story. That's one way to effectively use your title. You don't have to, but it can be done that way. Certainly when you get to the end of the story and the title has gained a new meaning, to me that's deeply satisfying, and it's part of, the 1-2 punch, if you will, of like the ending of your story and that circularity back to the beginning. If you circle it all the way back to the title, that can feel satisfying. It can tip you over into like a listing. So I think it's worth considering. But probably the number one thing I would say, because it seems to me, looking at our entries, that a lot of people really didn't put a huge amount of thought into their titles. They just had a functional title, which is fine. But like, you don't need to deliver a twist every time, but what you do need to do in a comp is have a title that harks immediately back to your story. Like, you don't have to, but that's going to help your chances. If I read the title and go, oh yeah, I remember that one, like that's good, right. Because it's part of what I guess keeps you in my mind as I'm making my decisions. And of course, ultimately, it's the story that's going to have to deliver. But I do think there's probably a little bit of favoritism that goes into the memorable stories. And part of being memorable is immediately harking back to it just with that title. So I don't know if I've convinced you, but
I think that's all true. What it comes down to is this. If you've got a great story and a bad title, it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
If you've got a great title and a bad story, it's not going to be fine.
Yeah.
So focus on the story. The title is, if you can get like a little bit extra out of it, you can, but definitely think about the story first.
So speaking of titles, I thought it'd be fun to shout out some of the ones that got our attention. And I should point out, once again, this is not the long list. These are just shout outs. We just wanted to call out some that we noticed and that sort of got our attention. So I had quite a few. The Tick, Tick, Ticking by Noah Vale.
Which must be a nom de plume, right? Pen name.
Oh, yeah.
Noah Vale. Yeah.
I just got that only by reading out loud. Sexy Bits Sold Separately by April Rains.
Possibly also a pen name.
Well, I don't know. Do they precede May Flowers or I don't know. As Far as the Eye Can See by Tess Allen. I quite like that one. It's a cliche. You're sort of already setting up what you're doing there. Sleeping Forever Rest by Stephanie Cantrell. Yeah, just a clever little twist there. Barney's Unfortunate Demise by Mahara Heslop. I liked How to Get Twitter Famous by Cheryl King.
Yeah, that's what you've been trying to do for years.
Tell me all your secrets, Cheryl. I also liked But Bob Really Is My Uncle.
I like that one too.
And that's Kathy Prokovnik, whose name I also remember from the last comp. We've got Death or Worms by A.A. Long.
Usually Death and Worms, I think.
Well, now you have an option. What are you going to pick? Choose your fighter.
I choose Death.
Oh, that's such a millennial thing to say. You're a Gen Xer. What are we talking about? Anyway, we've got Guts on the Floor and Other Hazards of Getting Your Head Examined by Nikki Nance. We've got Placeholder Street by Michael McGovern, which I was worried briefly it was a typo.
Oh, right. You thought it was just a placeholder
that's what
title.
I do. I give people placeholder names in my stories until I can come up with one. We had Pluck the Day as It Is Ripe by Samantha Ryan, who's actually one of our daredevils, so we'll be reading that one later, which is good fun. But that one actually taught me something. So I didn't know that Pluck the Day as It Is Ripe is like the more literal translation of Carpe Diem.
Really?
You know, we normally say it's seize the day.
Yeah,
apparently it's pluck the day.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, it's just a little fun fact for you. I'm assuming it's a fact. We've got Noxiously Ever After by Ansifi Adilla, which I quite like. Just a little subverting of expectations there. The next one, though, has to be my favourite title of all, and that's Yes Mum by Carla Porch, because I do not hear that enough. I also quite like The Way of the Bins by Bob Topping, another name I recognise from previous comp. And Oils Well That Ends Well by T. High. We've got Two Buckets and a Rope by Tom Brodkin, which was quite a moving story. And this is a good example of one that immediately to me recalls back the story.
That's true,
so,
yeah. You make a good point there.
Yeah, but it's, it's simple words, but it helps me recall it. We've got The High-Flying, Death-Defying Eighth Wonder of the World by Curtis Campbell. And, that's just a nice way to set up something a bit dramatic before we even get in there. And then we've got The Happy Scribblers Writing Group by Suzanne Wacker.
Yeah.
Which is quite cute. And again, like it's just sort of establishing a tone. And this is what I'm talking about by using your title to sort of set up where your story's going. Yep. And then probably my second favourite after Yes Mum has to be The Audacity of Men by Holly Sadowski, because
Yeah, I was going to say, like, if you want to get Amanda's attention, just call your story Fuck Men. And she'll be like, yes, winner. We got the winner right here.
And what about you? What else did you have that I didn't cover?
You've listed a lot of them, but I'll add a few more. So Everything in Australia is Trying to Kill You by Timothy Hayes. And that's another one that harkens back to the story, which
definitely.
There is someone called Everything in Australia. And the other two both are, I guess, cliches that have a meaning. This is what you were saying before. Once you read the story, the title takes on a new light. So the first is Stick It to the Man by Carla Connolly. And that has a literal meaning as well once you read the story that comes apparent.
I recall that story too.
And The Circle of Life by The Wayward Scribe. And The Circle of Life is about a balloon. So
a round one, I'm assuming.
A round one, assuming a circular balloon. And the story is about life, so that's another one that
it was a baby
ties
shower
together
or
the story.
something. Was it a baby shower?
Well, it was a birth and then it was a death.
Yes,
or
right.
a funeral.
Yeah, so I guess, I don't know if there's anything in that for other people who are listening about what those titles did for you. Is there something in it? You know, is there anything you can learn from the way other people title their stories? And also, like, let's do some shout outs of our favourite opening lines. This, honestly, a solid opening line, as much as we were saying it's not as important, like, they're fun though.
I think
you read one, you're like, ooh, love it.
Gets you on board. Yep.
So what have you got? What are some of your faves?
So the first one I've got is from That Little Voice by Mackenzie Knowles. And it's Why Can't I Kill My Mother-in-Law? Or at least maim. Gets your attention.
Should we be worried about either your mother-in-law or her mother-in-law?
I've already reported her to the police. The Way of the Bins by Bob Topping. It was my dull idea to clobber and bag the cat, and the odour is foul.
Yeah, I like that one too.
So another one that gets you into the story. It Never Rains But It Pours by Athena Law. The first sentence of the story is just the word moist. Another attention grabber there.
Apologies. We should have
done
a warning for that one
trigger
too.
warning for that word.
The M word.
Old Poisons by Frank Seymour, and the first line is, I want you to kill my husband. If by Jonathan Robertson, you can tell a lot about someone by how they pee their pants.
What can you tell exactly? That's what I want to know, Jonathan.
And how many ways are there that you can possibly pee your pants?
Number one, laughing over a story opening.
You know what? I like the way you pee your pants.
Makes me feel all warm and fuzzy.
Probably makes you feel warmer. And the last one on my list is Dependable by R.C. Barajas. And I'm not going to read the whole sentence because the entire story is one single sentence. Oh, yes, that's the one.
Wasn't it like 457 words?
Something else. It was close to 500. And it begins with the old Plymouth bumps like a tractor over a furrowed field. And it goes on for another 400 and something words.
Yeah.
But definitely worth mentioning that story.
A brave entry. And,
a brave entry.
You know, big props for that. So I'm just going to shout out one that immediately got my attention. And again, we don't know who's writing these stories until after we've made our final call. Although this one, as I previously mentioned, did have to get disqualified for being like my platonic life partner. So Petrosian Empire with Jim Baru, story Jim Baru. The opening sentence, is it wrong to call my kid a turd? Just saying turd is like a pressure valve releasing. Turd ass turd. I also liked The Harriet Calico or Cat Got Your Tongue by Sam James.
Which is a good title as well.
It is, yeah, evocative title. There is a cat covered in baked beans on the floor of the office. Immediately, like, why? I want to know. Why is the cat covered in baked beans? We've got Gift Horse by Morgan McIntyre. We barely stepped inside the art gallery of South Australia when I realised that my husband was trying to divorce me. Ouch. I also quite like The Trial of Ginny McBride, and I have to just confess now that I have a little bit of a racism issue against Americans because he stole my brother from me because he lives there and his family. So this one made me laugh. So The Trial of Ginny McBride by Malcolm Todd. He was loud and drunk and American. None of these would have endeared him to Ginny at the best of times. So maybe I'm just like, I don't know, projecting. So I also quite like the opening line of Bless This Mess by Chad Frame, which was, dawn breaks like a dropped jar of marmalade over night's black marble counter.
Yes.
Just a real vivid picture there without being purple prose. Quite a beautiful image. And we have a bit of a running joke between me and Ed about poorly described sunrises and sunsets and things. So you did well. You done good.
Yeah, that was a good one. Sometimes there's a tendency to over-describe things in stories that don't need to be described.
Yeah. That's we'll get on that high horse another time.
Yeah, another time.
So I also quite liked From the Amber Project by Joanna A. Amber was not your average girl. She was so much worse. It's a good example of one that just immediately subverts your expectations. So that's actually quite a great way to start a story. If you're not sure where to start, just immediately subverting expectations like that is a great one. depending on the tone you're trying to go for. We've got Stick It to the Man by Carla Connolly. If he knew he would be revolting against capitalism and tearing down the global economy that day, he might have worn a different shirt. Same thing, subverting expectations there. So let's talk about the prompts, because that's what we're here for. I just wanted to begin this prompt discussion by giving a shout out to A Love at First Sight by Jade and Christopher, who managed to hit all 3 prompts in a single sentence. And so I'm going to read that one out. I flatten the shirt and tuck it into my khaki pants, pulling out the wrinkles and hiding the small stain where I spilled the punch, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Or 3 birds with 1 stone.
Exactly, yeah, that's quite good.
So we've got the word punch, we've got the spilling something, and we've got the anti-prompt of the cliche killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So well done with that, Jaden.
With that out of the way, you can just tell the story.
Yeah.
Don't have to worry about it.
That's your precursor to whatever you want it to be next. So let's start with the punch prompt. And I wanted to begin by calling out Who Did What to the Punch by Lily Finch. And, you know, Lily went hard on the punch prompt, and this is an example from the story. Midge was so glad nobody pushed on to discover who'd punched the punch. Otherwise, she'd have been guilty as charged. Nobody was happier than Midge. She was pleased as punch.
I'm actually surprised we didn't get more pleased as punch, because that is a cliche and a punch.
Well, this particular story by Lily Finch had 22 instances of the word punch in a whole different range of formats, which is nearly 5% of the word count of the story. So that is bold. That's a bold move. Well done. I like to see someone challenge themselves. That's good. I would say, though, it can sometimes come at the expense of the story. So you've got to be careful with that. Like, absolutely, go nuts, have fun. But bear in mind, you've still got to be telling a really effective story. So that's important to remember if you're going to be going hard on any of the prompts.
So last word we used, last comp was right, and this time around was punch. And there were much fewer different variations on punch than there were on
Which,
right.
of course, because RITE can fit into a lot more words than punch can. So that was to be expected. But nevertheless, we had some real creativity with the use of punch. By far and away, the most common use of punch was like a physical punch, like a hit of some kind. And I did go out on Twitter, actually, and ask our followers to guess which was the most punched part of the body. And the results came back. The guesses were 41% gut, 31% to the face, and then an equal 14% each to the crotch or in a bowl, right? I said, where would you find the punch? And I would say that was number 1 by far, a punch to the gut or a gut punch, a physical one, well and truly outweighed any of the other types of punches. Although, as I did mention earlier, there were 2 punched dicks. So
yes,
look
very
out,
memorable,
everyone.
I think.
So the next most prevalent use of punch was the figurative, it felt like a punch kind of thing. And the literal hit appeared in like 93 stories, so a lot. And then the more figurative version, like 39 stories. But a lot of them were gut punches. So if you use gut punch, that was certainly one that we saw a lot of. The next most common type of punch, do you want to guess?
Like a punch bowl, a bowl of punch.
The drink. So there were 28 stories that featured punch as a drink and punch bowls and things like that. I was actually disappointed we didn't see any punch bowl the place, because punch bowl's a place in Australia. But there was one punchy punch, which I think is an actual type of drink, like it's an alcoholic beverage. And then 9 punch bowls, most of which, you will be unsurprised to learn, were spilled.
That's right. Yeah, that was the easy out there.
So just speaking of punch the drink and the figurative forms thereof, there were a couple of people who took an interesting sort of take on it, and I just wanted to call them out now. So we had Frances Greenleaf with the story 1976 Plymouth Beach, who wrote, "A warm explosion of stomach contents that looked curiously like fruit punch gave her hope." So that was a nice way to just flip it a little bit, and I'm not sure, it might have been the only punch vomit. There might have been more than one, but that was the most beautiful, I guess, the most evocative. How do you make vomit beautiful? Well done, Frances. And then Madeline Howard with It Goes Without Saying, who wrote, speaking of chemotherapy, "We watch in silence as a sickly red punch slowly winds its way down the tubes and into my blood." Very evocative. So those really got my attention. I thought it was a wonderful way to use punch and certainly, raise those stories in my estimation. Okay, next one I've got here is punchline. I was actually expecting to see a lot more punchlines. We had 11 stories that used punchline, and I was, I guess, hoping to see punchlines. I love a bit of comedy, so that was great. And then the next one was punch drunk.
Yes.
11 stories that used it and one that sort of used it. Tell us about Punch Drunk.
Yeah. So a lot of the stories we read used punch drunk to mean drunk.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean drunk.
No, it doesn't.
No, it means that you've been punched so much that it's as though you're drunk.
Often it was just a throwaway line, like this person was acting punch drunk. And some of them were used correctly. By no means was it every story, but it was clear to me that quite a few people misunderstood the term punch drunk. It's the Tweety Bird thing, right?
Yeah,
the Tweety Birds going around your head or the stars or whatever.
Which might be a generational thing because I don't think young people are getting in as many fights as people used to. So
that's true. And do you know what else? There's a phrase that gets used a lot now, which is like punchy, like feeling punchy, which is like slap happy or silly, like, oh, it's so late now, I'm feeling punchy. We get a bit punchy on this show. But yeah, I wonder, is that actually, because I haven't gone into the etymology of it, I do wonder, is that actually a flow on from punch drunk that's also been misunderstood and now it's created a new meaning? One of those ones where the dictionary goes, righto, guys, you've got your way now. We'll put it in as meaning drunk. We had quite a few references to Punch and Judy and they were used in different forms. So we had overall probably about 10 stories that referred to Punch and Judy or just to Punch the Puppet, Punchinello, which, I was also expecting to see. So not really surprised there.
Funnily enough, we got at least one Punch and Judy story last time around where
I know,
that wasn't even the
I know.
Yeah.
I remember that one very well because I think we did a critique on that one. So, yeah. Now, I just wanted to call out too, there were quite a few, as you indicated earlier, cliche phrases that use punch. There's several. So we saw a lot of those too. The most common one we saw was proud or pleased as punch. And just another little fun fact for everybody, punch should be capitalised there because we're talking about Punch the Puppet again.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So if you're pleased as punch, like he basically kills everyone and he's pretty happy with himself. So that's what it is to be proud or pleased as punch, which again, if we're talking about accurate usages of it, it should imply a bit of a sort of sinister thing. Like I shouldn't be proud as punch about my daughter's school achievements. You know what I mean? Yeah. You've got to, it's sort of like a self-satisfied, like, I'm pretty good, that kind of thing. I just wanted to call out some of the unique usages of punch as well, like a little bit more out of left field. And it's quite funny, I think, sometimes because when you try really hard to be original, that's when you're really not going to be. And I would like to let everybody know the two people who used cow puncher. Someone else thought of that too. Yeah. So cow puncher being like a cowboy, basically. Yeah. And the rest of these that I'm going to read through was one-offs. So if you did this, it was just you. Congratulations, you managed to be original. We had one coward punch, which again is a type of physical punch, but I was surprised to not see any more of those. That's also known as a king hit. Mm-hmm. We had one Suffolk punch, which is like a draft horse.
Right.
Yeah, okay. And I Googled it, and they're quite handsome horses. We had one use of the word punchin, which is one of the very few non-straight punch words, right? Like it's...
Yeah. So in fact, I looked that up and I still don't know what it means.
It has a lot of meanings. In this particular case, they were using it as like a wooden walkway. Yeah, But it can mean other things. It can mean like a post holding something up. It's got a bunch of different meanings. So it's Puncheon. Yeah. Quite a versatile word that we never hear. Yeah. Or I never hear. We had one punch party, which I didn't even know was a thing. One that stood out to me, which it's not a pleasant thing, but I quite liked it as a use of punch, was punch biopsy. Yes. So that felt a bit different and clever. I was surprised to only see one punch buggy.
Yeah. What's a punch buggy?
A punch VW Beetle.
Right, okay.
Punch buggy, you punch someone. Like you see a Volkswagen Beetle. Punch buggy.
This is a cultural thing I'm not familiar with.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to make you familiar with it. And we had one pinch and a punch. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Like pinch and a punch for the first of the month. Another one, this one I just found really evocative, was tin punched votive. Mm-hmm. So a little tin candle holder with holes punched in it. And one, I know you like this one, punch a cone.
Oh, yeah, just one.
Just the one.
Just one.
Really holding back. So well done if you had one of those unique takes. But look, you don't have to be the only one to do it as long as you do it well. And there were plenty of people who did it well. So well done.
All right, so then let's talk about the next prompt, spilling something.
So that was an action that had to occur in the story, something being spilled. But yeah, we didn't require people to say the word spill. No. As long as it was evident that something was being spilled. Yeah.
I think one of the things we want to achieve with the action prompt is to try and spark maybe some conflict in the story. The first time around we had crossing a line and now we have spilling something. So there's a trigger that you have to have some sort of conflict
potentially
in your story. Potentially. I mean, you can always interpret that how you like. But it can still be metaphorical, like you
For
can
sure.
spill the beans or spill the tea, as they say these days.
The kids these
days say.
For sure. Well, would you like to hear some of the ways in which
Absolutely.
things were spilled? So again, I went on Twitter just for funsies.
It's called X now, by the way.
I will continue using its dead name until I die. So I did a little poll to ask, which do you think was the most spilled liquid in the Not Quite Right prize this time? Because there were things other than liquids that spilled, but what do you think?
Well, I haven't seen these
read
stats.
them.
I've read them, but I would say it has to be punch, right? Has to be. Or blood.
Okay, so well, the options I gave were blood, milk, punch, and tea. So
Oh my God, milk.
So we had the guesses on Twitter were that 48% of people thought that blood would be the most spilled thing, which is fair enough given that everyone's punching each other. 22% said milk, 19% said punch would be the most spilled, and 11% said tea.
I would have said milk.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It was milk easily. So 23 instances of milk, including one milk punch specifically, that was spilled either figuratively or literally, and almost always literally. So that was quite a lot. But blood came in a very close second.
Yeah, there was
again.
quite a lot of blood.
Yeah, so 21 instances of blood being spilled. So pretty close there. Some stories were probably both. And then number 3, punch. And again, not far behind, 20 stories, again, including that milk punch that was spilled. Lots of broken punch bowls and disasters afoot. So great, because that's conflict, right? The most spilled object was beans. To be expected when we've got the anti-prompt of cliches, because of course it's a cliche phrase to spill the beans, and I know for sure that's where people were going with that one. And just some other bodily fluids that were spilled. If you'd like to go down that path, we had 9 tears were spilled, 8 guts.
Yep.
Spill your guts. 1 urine or piss was spilled. Yikes.
You can always tell a lot about someone by the way they spill their piss.
Apparently. 2 lots of vomit was spilled.
Yep.
2 buckets of shit. So to the 2 separate
In 2
individual
different stories.
authors who spilled buckets of shit, memorably fantastic. And
Maybe
then,
we should put those people in contact with each other.
I don't know, that could get very ugly very quickly. And then one in a sort of more evocative use of the word spill. Sweat and pheromones were spilled. We had a couple I'll call out for being just a bit more esoteric and unique takes on spilling. We had a story in which the pretending was spilled. We had a story in which her whole world was spilled, and her whole world happened to be her teenage child. We had thoughts and ideas, memories, sounds, talents all being spilled. We also had a bunch of emotions being spilled: so disgust, calmness, hatred, happiness, laughter. There was 1 leadership spill. I don't know if they're Australian, because over here we have more than 1 leadership spill going at any one given time. And then some random objects that were spilled. A bird.
A bird was spilled.
Knockers. Someone had her knockers spilling out of her shirt.
Oh, right. Okay.
I don't know if you remember that story, but I remember it well. That was a shock value story. That was quite entertaining. We had several rape kits.
Yeah, I remember those too.
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3 rape kits. But well done.
Yeah.
Lots of different types
a lot
of
of
spills.
different ways you can spill something, and they're all equally valid. I think we're not sticklers for doing things one way or another way. We love to see the creativity.
Yeah, for sure. And it turns out there's more than one way to spill a cat.
There sure is. But you know, one thing I didn't see spilled, and listeners of the podcast should know that this is the way into Amanda's heart, is solo. No one spilled any solo.
Whew, is it getting hot in here?
Okay, now let's talk about the anti-prompt. And you mentioned that some people had questions about the anti-prompt.
Yeah.
Because that's our own thing. Like, no one else does an anti-prompt.
Oh, we're so special.
So we should explain it. We've explained it in the past, but it bears
doesn't hurt
repeating.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what is the anti-prompt? What is it all about? And what makes a good anti-prompt and a bad anti-prompt?
What's the deal with the anti-prompt?
So this time around, our anti-prompt is avoid cliches.
Well, break the rule, avoid cliches.
Break the rule of avoid cliches. And so in writing, there are a number of informal rules that you follow. Rules are there for a reason. They make your writing better. So what is a cliche? Most people think about a cliche as being like an idiom or a saying, no use crying over spilt milk, that kind of thing. But it also just includes like common word combinations and even scenarios that come up. So a common word combinations might be something like the bitter end,
Yeah.
or the bare essentials, or running amok, or heaven sent. Just these combinations of words that you see again and again and again, and are just these little cliches. And so the reason for avoiding them is to make your writing original and different and interesting.
But I mean, coming back to your other point, like a cliche isn't necessarily a string of words. A cliche can be like a trope or a plot cliche, like the kind of, walking away like as the explosion is behind you, that kind of thing. There's all sorts of things that can be considered cliche. We have a really open interpretation of what that is. And we should be clear, like our interpretation of this stuff is always open because we want creativity. So we're not going to go, oh, no, you used a cliche phrase, not a cliche situation. No, that's not what this is about. Like if you can make an argument for it, great. That's good enough for us. And there are certainly many ways to show a cliche.
So similar to the avoid adverbs rule that we spoke about last time, the whole point of this is not that you can never use a cliche.
No.
It's that you need to be aware of them and do it consciously and eliminate them where you can.
And understand that the reason for that is that, it makes your writing more original if you can avoid, especially where you're probably talking about cliche phrases more so here, that in your language, that you find your own way to say something and don't take what's essentially a shortcut.
Yes. So that's what avoiding cliches is about. So what is the anti-prompt there? What are we looking for when we say break the rule of avoid cliches? And what we're not looking for is just fill your story with as many cliches as you can possibly come up with.
Yeah, this is meant to be, you've said it before, a challenge, not a license. And I know some people took it that way. And this is not to say that if you used a lot of cliches, your story was bad. That's one way. It is a way of interpreting that anti-prompt. And there were people who did that and did it well. And same with the adverbs, who went hard and did it, but did it with a reason, right? Like did it with a goal in mind for their story. And I think there were probably people in this round who didn't really have that goal in mind. And so it just came off as what we're trying to avoid, which is that type of shortcut writing where you're being unoriginal, as opposed to like, I've taken this and really run with it and gone hard and challenged myself and still made a compelling story despite breaking the rule.
And I think your thought process as a writer should be something along the lines of, well, how can I break the rule of avoiding cliches? How can I embrace a cliche in one form or another while still making sure that my story is original and is compelling?
Well, I guess the point is, if the rule is there to say avoid cliches because they can make your writing generic, then you need to break that rule while not having generic writing. Like you still got to achieve that objective, right? Or unless you've got some super creative take where that's part of it, but you've still got to have original writing that breaks the rule. So it's tricky, can be tricky, but it certainly was done very well by some people. So we'll get into some of the examples shortly.
All right. So, but before we get into the examples, there were some questions that people had on social media around the anti-prompt. So maybe we can look at those questions and see if it sheds a little bit more light on what we're looking for.
Sure. So we had Christoph Meixliu on Twitter who asked, how do you decide whether the anti-prompt was met successfully? And do you ever disagree about how an anti-prompt was interpreted? So how do you decide if it was met or not? Yeah.
So as we've said, we're very open and lenient on all of these prompts. The point is not to be a stickler for the rules. The point is really the purpose of the prompts is to inspire you, number one, to make you think and to make sure that you wrote the story for the competition. But beyond that, for me, as long as you meet the requirement, we consider that a success and you're in, basically. But if you can interpret the prompts in a more creative way and an original way, then that's essentially bonus points.
Yeah, I mean, I indicated earlier that is, at least for me, a quick shortcut into winning my favour is like, oh, yes, that was a clever idea, a clever take on the prompts. So it can be a good way to do it. But you don't have to be like hammering every prompt. Like sometimes it's just one that you've really run with and the other two fade into the background. That's completely acceptable and often appropriate.
There's only one story I can think of that we excluded because it actually didn't meet this prompt. It's actually really hard not to meet this prompt because you have to write a story with no cliches, essentially. But this story really did not have any cliches or any way of...
We couldn't make an argument for it, could we? And maybe there's one to be made, but at the end of the day, you know, it's our call. We wanted to be lenient. We were open to it. We were looking for it and couldn't find how
as long as there's something we can point to and say, there is the attempt right there.
Yeah, but that's why we have our brief explanation field. So if you can make an argument for it there that, you know, is a sound argument, that's enough. Because even like you might take a really creative, you're like, oh, I'm going to go edgy and I don't know what they're going to think. Is it quite there? I was going to say quite right. And if you can just, if you're not sure, that's what the field's there for. Chuck it in there, go, oh, just so you know, here's what I was going for. And
you only really need to do that if it is quite obscure and difficult.
Exactly.
To
like
get,
if it's obvious, we will get it. And again, we'll be lenient and we'll be vouching for you, like to get through if your story's otherwise a compelling story.
And for me, I only really double check to make sure that they hit the prompts when we're talking about the long list and the short list.
Even just the short list, sometimes I think some might slip through the net if they're a little bit on the cusp.
Yep.
But for winning a cash prize, it has to be clear to us that you've hit every prompt. So moving on, we had Todd Beaton on Twitter who asked, I'm curious if you guys had certain hopes and expectations about how writers would interpret the anti-prompt, and then whether you were pleasantly surprised by the results, disappointed, or what you'd hoped.
So just in terms of expectations, I didn't go into this with set ideas of, well, I think people are going to do X, Y, and Z, and I hope they do more like this and not like this. I think when we come up with the prompts, we try to think of things that are provocative and open, and we really are interested to see what people are going to come up with. So I definitely don't have a preferred way of handling things.
No.
So I think the best ones were the ones that I wouldn't have thought of myself.
Yeah, it's always really compelling to see someone taking you, oh, yeah, that was clever. And that's certainly, again, bonus points if you can do that. And then if you deliver a great story as well, you're almost certainly going to get somewhere with it. I guess I can't help my brain from going. I sometimes think about, oh, well, what would I do if I was entering the comp? But that has no bearing on what I want to see.
Yep.
That's more just like I'm challenging myself. How would I handle this? And I guess when we're thinking about it, we like to make sure that it works, that it makes sense. And so we come up with some ideas of how could you handle that kind of thing to make sure it works. But yeah, I guess, again, in terms of hopes and expectations, I'm hoping you'll wow us. I'm hoping you'll come up with some cool thing that I never thought of because you've been challenged and because you've applied your creative energy to it. And that we'll see a bunch of different takes, and that we'll see edgy stuff, that we'll see funny stuff, that we'll see just the complete gamut of different takes. And we do every time, and we're always surprised by the creative ways in which people handle it. All right, so now we had Matthew on Instagram who asked, what in your view makes for a genuinely effective and worthwhile use of cliche in a story? And we'll get to some of the specific takes, but just generally, like overall, what were some ways in which people handled that?
So for me, I think the best way of handling the prompt is to find a way to use a cliche without it being a cliche. So one way to do that, this is actually similar to one of the ways we spoke about with adverbs, is to have a character use the cliche. Because people do speak in cliches. They say at the end of the day and all this kind of thing. So that's one way of doing it. It's a pretty straightforward way of doing it.
And there we saw plenty of stories like that. And this is where I'm saying we had a lot of gumshoe detectives and things like these types of people who would use these types of cliche phrases.
Yeah.
We also saw, interestingly, mostly women, but mothers giving like these sort of
malapropisms?
Yeah, of cliche phrases sort of mixed up and jumbled up and giving that as advice to their children. We saw that. That's an effective use. It's true and relatable. And we also had quite a few stories involving either dementia or like head injury or other reasons why people were a bit jumbled up. And so they weren't using the cliches necessarily correctly. They were using them incorrectly. And that was a great valid take on the prompt. One thing I just wanted to call out, and because I was expecting to see this, and when I saw it, I was like, yes. There were 9 dark and stormy nights or uses of that cliche, and that was fun because we're all authors, right? That's the classic author cliche.
Yes.
And so, that was a good one to choose if you went. I mean, it wasn't an original one to choose, I guess. Several people did it, but it was appropriate. And in most cases like that was worked in a way that challenged it as opposed to just beginning the story in that way. It was challenging that cliche and sort of making fun of it. So that was a good way of doing it as well. So once we decided our winner and everything, I logged back onto the forum and it was great to see everybody supporting each other. So if you didn't enter the comp this time around, we have the new Not Quite Right forum where everyone can jump on and share their stories and ask questions of each other and get to know each other. And we were on the forum before the comp, but once it launched, we had to get the hell out of there. So I didn't see this stuff until recently, but it was really great to see everybody sort of tossing this idea around. What is the anti-prompt, and helping each other understand it and running their ideas up the flagpole. Like, is this stupid? Help me out here, and being quite supportive. So I just wanted to, I guess, go through a couple of questions that appeared on the forum to give, our answer to those questions. So we had Gabriel, who said, can I change a cliche and still call it a cliche?
Sure.
So an example, better never than late, or not all gold glitters, something like that.
I think absolutely that's valid, and that's creative, and that's, again, a way of using a cliche without it being a cliche.
For sure. Completely valid way of, and absolutely gets through the gates. That kind of thing, again, we can see what you're trying to do, and it's absolutely valid. And Kate McD, also on the forum, responded to Gabriel and said, well, I've used jack of all trades and mistress of none, so I hope it's okay. And yes, of course it is okay. That's great. Another question, Sandra Tom Jones on the forum, who asked, when is a cliche a cliche? And we've covered this already. So Sandra had started Googling, like, what's a cliche, getting different lists, sort of starting maybe to get a bit confused by what exactly do you mean by cliche? As we've indicated, it could be a cliche phrase, cliche part of speech, cliche topic. You can even have, we didn't bring this up before, but
cliche characters.
Cliche characters, exactly, like the jock. So absolutely all of those things are valid. And please, in future, consider it open. Like, if you interpret it one way and you can argue for that, we're on your side.
So let's look at some examples from people's submissions of how they avoided cliches or didn't avoid cliches, avoiding cliches, if you will. The first example I have is from The Legitimate Cliches of Lorna and Bill by Erin Brandt Philliter. And this writer used the cliches in a literal sense. A few other stories I read also did a similar thing, but this one did it quite well and quite extensively, I think, as well. So what I mean by that is someone was literally spilling milk, for example, and literally sweeping flour under a rug. And so it's a bunch of cliches. Again, this is using cliches, but they're not cliches because just sweeping something under a rug literally is not a cliche.
Very clever.
Another one was Rebel Rebel by Ella McAuliffe.
Yep, I remember that one.
And she had a character called Cleo Shay. Or Cliche.
And the story was all about being told to avoid Cleo Shay because she's a bully or she's
weird.
Yeah, or whatever it was. So it fed into the plot as well, that the whole idea of avoiding cliches. So that was clever.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of character names, we also had 1976 Plymouth Beach by Francis Greenleaf, who had a character who was given the nickname because they used cliches in their dialogue a lot. Cliche Guevara.
Yep.
Which got a laugh out of me. That was quite clever. So then there was The Attraction by Philippa Freegard. And what I really liked about Philippa's story was that she linked cliches to fairground rides. So again, we sort of had a literal take on the cliches where we had, like, on a carousel, someone getting off their high horse, for example, giving up the ghost train, and a character called Storm who was riding the teacups. And I really thought that was quite a cute and clever way to do it too. So that gave me a smile. Yeah. So a good example of finding a way where cliches really fit and feel appropriate was The 43rd Tuesday by Tanya Edlington. So Tanya used cliches like as meaningless platitudes, like when you're coming out of a relationship, and anybody who's, come out of a relationship has probably had that experience, like, oh, there's plenty more fish in the sea. Yeah. And, I'm not sure if that's one that was specifically used in that story, but just the idea that that's when you get to hear this shit and it's just washing over you and you're like, this is bullshit. That feeling, I guess, evoking that was an effective way to use them that really felt real to me and relatable. Another one, and this is a fun one, was Dirty Talk by Sky Joyner, because another situation in which people might use cliche phrases is, dirty talk. And that's what happened in this story. So finding a natural fit for the cliches was clever.
There was The Piss Up by Patricia Fitzgerald, in which they couldn't organise a piss up in a brewery, literally. So, taking a cliche and turning that into your plot.
Another one where the cliches were taken literally was Death or Worms by A.A. Long, who used the cliches as plot beats. So again, these things were actually happening, but it was done in a way that wasn't quite so in your face. So I think someone was taking the bait, for example, but it was actually talking about bait. They were going fishing and it just got woven in as opposed to being like, oh, they took the bait. And I thought that was quite clever too. Another one that took it really literally and took it to the nth degree, and I do like to see people really leaning into things and challenging themselves, was Every Fibre by Christy Hartman. Mm-hmm. So Christy really used the phrase like, I love you with every fibre of my being, and then went with it. Right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about different types of fibres,
Yes.
different fabrics to describe a relationship from beginning to end. So there were different colours and like using the texture of the fibres to compare against what it feels like in a relationship. So we had itchy coils of green wool grate at my cheeks when you hold her hand. So that's jealousy coming through in the itchy coils of green wool. But the more I pull, the deeper they cut into my skin. So I guess taking that cliche and then like really going beyond what is now cliche into something completely original now, because you've gone to the extreme, is another really great way to do it.
Yeah.
If you can pull it off.
And that's a great concept. And it's one that if you think of, you've got your story.
Yeah.
Like,
it's written itself. Yeah. You just have to find the great metaphors that you want to run with.
So you mentioned earlier, there were a few stories that used things like dementia or memory loss or other conditions essentially to have, usually mothers, getting phrases mixed up. So one of those was Memory Lane by Shannon Mackey. One of the phrases that she used was someone was about to sing on stage and her mother says break an egg instead of break a leg.
And specifically that mother had English as a second language, and so it's playing on that and using that character to expose the anti-prompt, I guess. But I guess there's this range of people who are finding natural ways to incorporate cliches somehow. There's people who are subverting the cliches either by changing them or somehow using it as a setup for like a joke or a play on words kind of thing. And then there's the people who took it super literally. But another kind of one that I just saw once, one example, I believe, was Revenge is a Dish Best Served Cold by Anna Fulger, who used cliches as spells. So it was a dark and stormy night was a spell that made a storm begin. Yeah. So that was, a unique take on that. And then I guess one that subverted expectations was Summer Heat by Mark Carswell, who turned the cliche back on itself. Cliche in this case being it's not you, it's me.
Yep.
And I'll just read the line. This is the final lines of the story. Ben, she says as she puts her sunglasses on, listen carefully. It's not you, it's me. He snorts. His mouth contorts in contempt. You may laugh, Ben, but it's not a cliche. I'm putting myself first, for once. Novel, isn't it? And that last line, novel, isn't it? It made me think differerly. And I think it really packaged it up nicely to show how Mark was subverting that cliche. So those are the examples. Those are the things that I guess stood out to us as the more creative takes on the anti-prompt. There's a lot of different ways to do it, and I'm sure there's just as many, if not more, different ways to do it. And I hope to see more unique and creative takes the next time around. But look, again, we don't want the creative take to overpower the story either. And maybe some of these did that. Maybe some of these were all about the clever idea and less about the story. And ultimately, if you might get far with that, but if you want to win, it has to be a good story. So if you can't find a way to tell a good story, then you're in trouble. Yeah. So in that case, simplify by all means and dial it back.
So now that we've spoken about the prompts, we've talked about what we like and what we don't like, let's actually dig into some examples. So there were 2 people who signed up for the Daredevil option, and that means that we read your story out live, so to speak, on the podcast and critique it live. And the 2 stories we have are The Star-Crossed Lovers of Living Dead Girls by M. Lee Gray and Pluck the Day as It Is Ripe by Samantha Ryan. Let's read those stories out and talk about what we think.
I'm excited. So I hope, Samantha and M, that you are ready for this.
Yeah.
Make sure you're in a frame of mind to be challenged on the things that may help to improve your stories. And thanks for putting yourselves out there, because in doing this, in critiquing your story, which not everybody would be brave enough to do, you're allowing other people to gain some insight into things that might help them too. So thank you. So who are we going to start with? Who's our first victim?
Well, let's just take them in order, which is a random order. The Star-Crossed Lovers of Living Dead Girls by M. Lee Gray. My truck crushed Phil. Leslie crouches behind him and floods a bowl with water so half of it spills onto the sidewalk. The twister never happens on a dark and stormy night. It drops out of a clear blue sky and sucks everything under the sun into its funnel. It goes without saying that Phil dies in every version of this life, and he takes another piece of my heart with him. What happens when my love is gone? Is it better to feel something or nothing? It's written in the stars. I'm Phil's Sunday morning. Sunday comes off his tongue, so it sounds like Sunday when he whispers in my ear. He kisses his way down my neck, down my chest, down, 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 until nothing in the world exists but us. It doesn't matter that I'm only his secret. In my heart, I know he'll see the light, and we'll be together forever. As luck would have it, I'm your dog in this next life. Leslie gets down on all fours and laps water from the bowl. I'm a cat person. Leslie clips a leash to her t-shirt so it dangles behind her like a tail. Like clockwork, before the twister, the pregnancy test is always positive. Phil always hopes for a boy, then a girl, then... There's always another then. He wonders if the baby is his at all. Does he even know what type of girl I am in the first place? I'm ruining his life. Don't I know he's married? At this point, he's already got one foot in the grave. I love him and hate him all the same time, but there's nothing I can do. Destiny is out of my hands. Don't reinvent the wheel. Just name me Spot. Tufts of fur sprout from Leslie's t-shirt. We're back to square one. Phil won't remember me. He'll stand up and walk off into his next life. I'll cry like a baby until one day, it happens just like that, I'll miss him. I'll want him, need him. Day in, day out, I'll search for him, and when I find him, well, I know what happens next. On all fours, Leslie starts digging. She's scooping handfuls of dirt until she's so deep in the hole I can't see her anymore. Beggars can't be choosers. It's better than nothing. Leslie scrambles back out of the hole, curls at my feet, and gnaws on the end of a femur. Second place for another lifetime is a punch in the gut. Can Phil change? Will he change? I'm at my wit's end. Forgive and forget? Not again. All's fair in love and war, Leslie says. Grab his feet. You won't forget where you buried us, right? In the hole with Phil, I'm light as a feather. Leslie covers us with dirt, sealing us in our own private universe. 6 feet deep, I'll always be Phil's number one girl.
So, initial reactions?
Initially, I had to read this a few times, I don't know about you, to work out what was going on.
Yeah, for sure.
It's one of those stories that has something hidden inside of it, and you've got to try and work out what it is. And there were actually quite a lot of stories that did that, and I think sometimes writers can fall into a trap of trying to be creative by obscuring what it is that they're talking about. Mm. And that can work to a point, but you have to let the reader in a little bit. Mm. And I feel with a lot of this story, there are some points where it's difficult to understand what's going on, and it's difficult to get the specifics about who these people are. What are the relationships between them?
Who are they to each other? Yeah. And you say you've got to let the reader in, and I will say it. I felt on the outside of this story, even after rereading. I felt I had a lot of questions, but not in a way that felt provocative, but in a way that felt frustrating.
Yep.
I've got an analytical brain. I want to understand things. And while I appreciate when things can be, a little bit mysterious, I don't think that this was mysterious so much as, I hate to say it, a little bit confusing. And I think probably the biggest issue for me there was, who is Leslie? Yep. Who are these people to each other? I can sort of allow the mystery of what's going on here with, I guess, some sort of reincarnation kind of, or this Groundhog Day kind of thing, right? Yeah. Like, I get that that's what's happening, although some of the mechanics of that weren't clear to me. Yeah. For example, where does Leslie get a bowl and water to fill it? And then all of a sudden there's a leash, and like, where are these things appearing from? That's sort of the mechanics. I can let that slide. It's a little bit unsettling, I guess, as a reader to sort of try and understand, well, why is that not explained to me? Or like, I don't have a logical reason for that that's given in the story. But like, I need to know who these characters are to care about them, to care what's happening in these relationships.
So I think that's the core of it. And there are 3 characters in this story. We have Leslie, who is the person who's acting like a dog. We have Phil.
Or transforming into a dog.
Yeah. We have Phil, who is the person who's been crushed by the truck. And we have a narrator who seems to be a third person, but who is never really named. You get the connection between her and Phil.
It's a woman. Yes,
It's
we
a
know
woman.
that much. Yeah.
But it's difficult to kind of gather the details about who Leslie is as a person. We know that Phil is having an affair with her, with the narrator.
Mm-hmm.
But who exactly is Leslie? It's not clear that she's the wife in this
No,
situation.
I didn't interpret Leslie as being the wife. To be honest, I interpreted Leslie as a bit of an unusual, like an anomaly. Like, why are you there? What purpose do you serve except perhaps to have this interesting idea of someone turning into a dog in the next life? And I am sure that Emily Gray knows how Leslie fits in.
Exactly.
You know, I'm sure there's a reason, but even now, reading it again, I don't know what that reason is. How does shifting into a dog then impact the relationship?
And I think that shifting into a dog can be quite powerful because it's really strange. And I really love reading stories where something just absurd and strange happens.
100%.
But we don't get the why and we don't get the emotional connection with the characters. Like, is there something that makes a dog relevant to the to the
so
story,
there's no
to the relationship?
payoff to it. It's kind of just there floating on its own as this distinct part, but it needs to be an intrinsic part for that to really fit. But it's also quite a change in tone that I don't know was appropriate for this story. So like lately I've been getting really stuck into Edgar Allan Poe's idea of the single effect, right? Which is talking about how, and he's talking about short stories, so it's super appropriate for flash fiction, possibly even more so, that you are attempting to evoke just a single emotion and that everything in your story needs to lead to that. All right. Now, that's just one way of doing things, but let's just analyze the story from that perspective for a second. Most of this story, and if we go back to the title too, we're talking about star-crossed lovers, right? To me, the emotion of this story, the heart of this story is the idea of always being someone's second best forever and ever, and the shock of that. So we start with a twister, right? We start with this twister coming out of the clear blue sky and crushing, well, in this case, Phil, but I can see a metaphor where if you're in a relationship with someone, and I've never been in a relationship with a married person who wasn't married to me, but I can imagine that if you're the other woman, you might entertain ideas that one day you will be the woman. And when something shifts, in this case a pregnancy comes along, and it's like a twister comes out of the clear blue sky and basically slaps you down and nope, you'll always be the second woman. That can be really shocking and devastating. And that, to me, is the emotion that this story was going for.
Yeah.
And then to switch that out now to be like, now we're talking someone's quite comically really turning into a dog, like the tufts of fur sprouting from T-shirt. That's a pretty bizarre kind of concept. It's like a real juxtaposition of ideas that, to me, don't serve each other. They're almost two separate stories. One's a comedy and one's this sort of really quite cutting view of what it's like to be the other woman.
Yeah, and it is complicated a lot by the fact that there are two women and you can't hone in on the unnamed protagonist and what her story is.
Yeah,
and
who
how
is she?
Yeah,
she doesn't even have a name. Like, why doesn't she have a name? Like, I mean, she doesn't because she's not talking about herself like Elmo in the third person, right? But we as a reader, need to meet her. And we haven't really, not really, not in the way that we've met the other two. And yet she's the heart of the story.
And Leslie, you get even less about her. And I think apart from the fact that she turns into a dog, there's really nothing that you can say about Leslie.
No. Who is she? Why is she there? What's her relationship to Phil as well? Why are all three of them together, seemingly travelling together? I don't know. Are they travelling together? The truck crushes Phil. This is another thing. I don't understand the mechanics of that. What I will say about the opening line of the truck crushing Phil is that that's a good choice in a way. It's really shocking.
Yeah.
Right? But, and both of us independently made this note and we were conferring before we began, but we actually think maybe the next bit might have been
the better first line.
The better fit for the first line, which is, so the current first line is, my truck crushed Phil.
Yeah.
And what we're suggesting might have been a better choice was the twister never happens on a dark and stormy night. It drops out of a clear blue sky and sucks everything under the sun into its funnel.
Yeah.
And again, like for me, that's harkening back to the metaphor itself. That's really what you're trying to say. You're not trying to say your truck crushed Phil. That is a component of the plot.
Yeah.
And it's shocking by all means. But introducing the twister first, I actually like it as a better line. Like it's written more eloquently, but it's also setting up what happens to Phil. You don't necessarily need to hide Why a truck crush, Phil? I mean, that's a way of doing things for sure. But in this case, I actually think it would have probably worked better to set up that. And then there's the shock very quickly, like the next line maybe. Oh, that's what happens with the twister.
Yeah. And reading that first line as well, the first and second line, my truck crushed Phil. Leslie crouches beside him and floods a bowl with water so half of it spills onto the sidewalk. That first sentence, immediately you're thinking, who's Phil? What's happened to him? What's going on? And there's no explanation.
No, we've jumped straight to Leslie.
Leslie is doing something that you don't really understand what is happening, flooding a bowl with water so half of it fills onto the sidewalk.
Again, this is where I'm saying there's two stories going on at the same time. You've set up two dramatic questions for us there. What's happened to Phil, which arguably is the more compelling question. And then what's going on with Leslie? Where did this bowl come from? What's the bowl for? And all of that is given to us in very quick succession and not paid off. Neither of them really paid off until a bit later in the story.
Yeah. So then going on to the next line, it goes without saying that Phil dies in every version of this life and he takes another piece of my heart with him. So what's being set up here is this whole astrological thing. It says star-crossed lovers, every version of this life. We're getting introduced to this idea of reincarnation, but the rules of this universe are not really clear. Like how this is clearly not the way that our world functions in any way that we can understand or relate to.
You say reincarnation is not something that we can understand. We kind of do, right? We have an understanding of what reincarnation looks like as a concept. And what it is that someone dies and then they either immediately or sometime after that are reincarnated as either another human or another living being.
Yeah.
But in this story, they're not all dying at the same time. Yeah. And our main character seemingly doesn't die. The only person who we've seen die is Phil, who's crushed by the truck. Well, we've assumed he's dead. We've assumed he's dead. And so why is Leslie reincarnating more quickly than Phil? Why is our main character not reincarnating yet? And it's implied that she's going to be buried and killed and then will reincarnate by Leslie, who is already the reincarnation. The reason I guess I'm bringing this up is because that kind of stuff is a real stumbling block for readers. And it's frustrating. And it's like, I want to understand as a reader. Like, that's what I'm seeking. I'm seeking to meet you in the middle and to hear your worldview through your story and to meet you there. Yeah. And I can't do that because I don't understand how this is all working.
So the next lines, what happens when my love is gone? Is it better to feel something or nothing? So look, at this point, I think the reader has too many questions to really connect with an emotional statement. So I think that kind of reflection might be better served coming a bit later once the reader is able to say, well, okay, now I know what's happening. Now you're explaining how you feel about the situation.
So I think too, like this is something that we talk about many times is like to try and avoid that interiority as well. So you're saying put it later. Maybe don't have it at all. What struck me about those lines, because the thing is they're beautiful, right? There's something in there. Like those are quite deep questions that you're asking us to ponder there, which is great. However, again, it's a tonal shift. So we've gone from like this person's stating what's happening, showing us the scene, and then now we're in her head, now we're out, and something's weird's going on with Leslie. And I think it's a bit too much hopping around. What I would have liked to have seen there instead was answering some of those questions for us so that we could move on to the next part of the story, invested in the characters and what happened next, and satisfied that we understood enough about how this world works for it to be believable when she starts turning into a dog, and for that to still be shocking for sure, but in a way that feels real and satisfying.
And you understand why it's happening.
Yes, exactly. And I think as an extension of that, like why, apart from, and I would call it comedic effect of Leslie turning into a dog, whether that's the intention of that or not, that was the impact on me, that it was shockingly funny. Why is Leslie filling a bowl as a first priority and lapping it up? What's that got to do with anything apart from, I guess, to reveal to us that she's slowly turning into a dog? But why are we having that slowly revealed to us? Like, what's the payoff that you're hoping to achieve with that in the reader? Have a think about that. I don't know. I mean, Emily Gray said, hit me. You know, she was willing to take the tough criticism, but I feel like this is not a compliment sandwich. This is a shit sandwich, right? Let's tell Emily Gray some of the stuff that she did really well.
Yeah, so look, in the next paragraph, well, let me read it. It's written in the stars. I'm Phil's Sunday morning. Sunday comes off his tongue, so it sounds like Sunday when he whispers in my ear. I do like that piece because I think it's actually really hard to do, to be succinct and come up with a detail that perfectly paints, like, I know Phil now. I know what he's like after just that one detail.
Yep.
So I think that's really well done.
I agree. That was a line that stood out to me too. So now I would like to share this as an example of what to do when you bring a character onto the stage of your story, to have a detail like that, a different detail, not he had brown hair and blue eyes, right? Something about him that gives us a little bit of background, makes us feel something, makes us feel like we know that guy now. Yep. That was expertly done, I would say.
Yes,
very
absolutely.
well done.
Okay, and then so there is a semi-explicit scene here of kissing down until nothing in the world exists but us. It doesn't matter that I'm only his secret. In my heart, I know he'll see the light and we'll be together forever. So I think that is a great way of establishing the relationship between the two. And I really love this idea of calling back. This is so much better than like a train of thought in the character's head.
Like it's a flashback.
It's a flashback.
But it's a dramatic way of showing it.
Yeah, and in that paragraph, now you know the relationship between them. And it's also implied that there is some infidelity going on there.
And it's implied in a way that's clear. So here's where the balance tips in favour, where we're saying, like, you've taken the reader, you've let them in, to what you're trying to say. It was clear that they're in an extramarital relationship and that is at the heart of the conflict in this story. And so I would like to see that part move, like, right to the front of the story, basically. And this is me assuming that is the aim of this story, and it may not be, and ultimately that's Emily Gray's creative decision of what to say in this story.
Okay, so the next paragraph, like clockwork before the twist of the pregnancy test is always positive. Phil always hopes for a boy, then a girl, and there's always another then. He wonders if the baby is his at all. Does he even know what type of girl I am in the first place? I'm ruining his life. Don't I know he's married? At this point, he's already got one foot in the grave. I love him and I hate him all at the same time, but there's nothing I can do. Destiny is out of my hands. The point of the pregnancy test and the repeated pregnancy test, I'm not quite sure. And at this point, he's already got one foot in the grave. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, I mean, are these different versions of the life? Like, for example, sometimes he's happy and excited for a boy, sometimes he wants a girl, sometimes, like, to me it reads as though these are different lives being lived, and in some versions he's really angry about it, and in others maybe he's older. I don't know, but in every case there's always a pregnancy test. It always comes before the twister, and then presumably Phil always dies, with, I guess, the other secondary impact, or the main impact from the perspective of this story, of our main character also being, like, crushed emotionally at the same time, like Phil essentially saying, either dying or saying, I don't want a bar of you or this baby. But again, like, why is the pregnancy test always the case? Because it seems like it's coming as a surprise to her every time, despite the fact she knows it happens every time. Why is the twister always happening? Why does Phil always die?
Yeah.
And again, we can understand this idea of fate, right? And you can reincarnate and you still meet the same fate. Like, I understand that that's what we're trying to achieve here. But at the same time, logically, why do pregnancy tests and, like, surprise pregnancies and twisters happen every time, but not Phil's same reaction every time, or not the lead up, like, I guess, the relationship and how it comes together? Why is that not the same? Why can Leslie, who we don't know who that is, sometimes be a dog, but presumably you are always a person, or at least always somehow in a state in which you can be in a romantic relationship with Phil? So, I mean, I guess that's the ongoing theme of this one, is that we just have way more questions than answers. Yeah. And I think in Flash, maybe one question to be lingering on is probably enough. It's probably better to err on the side of clarity, because I, as a reader, don't necessarily feel satisfied by mystery over and above being satisfied by a good story, like a clear story that makes sense to me, that I go, oh, relatable. To me, that I think would get me more than a mystery.
For me personally, I don't mind. I like puzzles. I like putting the pieces together, but the pieces have to be there.
Yeah, and they have to fit.
You have to be able to find them. Even if I read it twice and they're there and it kind of comes together, then that might be satisfying, but they have to be there.
Yeah. And I think it's fair to say they weren't there in this piece. And I'm quite confident that they're there for Emily Gray, the author of the story, who gets it, who knows how this world works. But there's two sides to this equation. And the weirder you go, in a way, the more you need to take us along the ride with you. I want to go on the weird rides. Like, sign me up, but make sure, like, I've got my ticket and everything to go on the ride with you. I would say there's some really nice moments in the story. And so to me, like, it had a lot of potential. Like, I can see that this is a good writer with an ability to, like, evoke emotion and evoke the senses and just draw me into a scene. So I would say absolutely ticks in those boxes. I'd love to see this story reworked. I'd love to see what it could become with a little bit more clarity, where we get to go on that journey a little bit more and get the emotional payoff of what you're trying to say in this story.
There's something in there that is interesting and like I feel like it just needs to come out and it needs to be the focus of the story. And everything, like you said, with Poe's, it's not Poe's law or something else, but
the single effect.
The single effect. Everything needs to be driving towards that thing. You need to identify what is that kind of core thing.
And I think that, to me, that is the theme of this. These situations where someone is having an extramarital affair, they're the other woman and always feeling second best, and then maybe getting their hopes up, and then those hopes being dashed. That's the fate part, right? That's the reincarnation part. Every time I go back to this guy, I get my hopes up and then I get crushed again, and it feels like death. You killed my hope, right? Yeah. But I come back again and, what do you know? It happens again. And no matter what happens, the ultimate one, I guess, is the pregnancy, and then it's over for good because he doesn't want a bar of you anymore. But this idea that you don't learn your lesson. And again, it comes back in the title of Star-Crossed Lovers. And I think that really is a compelling and interesting, moving kind of piece. And I'd love to see that come to the forefront more, potentially at the expense of this idea of Leslie and what that kind of reincarnation looks like. Make maybe a different creative choice that further explores that one single effect, that further explores the idea of just being trapped in this cycle of red flags that you're ignoring. I'm not sure what that would look like, but I guess that's the challenge. Like, how can we craft it so that all the pieces are moving in the same direction?
You do have to simplify like that in flash fiction because if there is a larger story that you have in your head, Emily, that there are these three people and there's this whole backstory and this whole history, it's going to be a challenge to fit that into 500 words in a way that you still say what you need to say.
But you know what? I have full faith that she can do it, because if you can bring that character of Phil out in one very brief line, then why can you not, in the same way, evoke an entire past relationship in just with a detail, a single choice of detail that immediately is recognizable to everybody? What you have going for you here is that, in a sense, you're in the real modern world. We understand, like, the physicality of the environment. Like, what I thought was a good choice was that we are just looking at this one little snapshot. There is one scene and there's stuff happening. That's great. Certainly choosing someone being crushed by a truck and then the aftermath of that is enough. Like, that is flash fiction, right? So that was a really excellent choice. So I think there's a lot here to work with. I think it's about maybe being clear to yourself, like within yourself, what am I saying here? Yeah. What do I want this to be? And another real strength here, I would say, is the use of the dramatization. There isn't a lot of interiority here. Yep. It's not cliche by any means. There's no, here we go again. There's no sense of that. Like, I'm on a wild ride from the first sentence to the last. And so that's a real strength of this. And if executed well, could really make you stand out, because it's like, remember that one? Yeah. Either where, the twister came and it was a big shock, or where the woman turned into the dog, or just where I felt really sad because I was reflecting on what it's like to always be second best. Like, all of those things could really have an impact on a reader. It's about choosing which one and just letting that be the one that lingers. So thank you, Emily Gray. Hopefully we helped you out a little bit with the story, and we did enjoy it. And thanks for taking the bullet on this one, because 100%, you are brave. It's hard. Man, I can't take feedback like that. I'd be crying in a corner. Don't be crying in a corner. There's a lot to like about this story. Absolutely. And it's always a process of improvement. So let's go with our next daredevil, Samantha Ryan, with her story, Pluck the Day as It Is Ripe. It was hard for Clancy to tell in the mirror what the words really looked like, because they were backwards, and that made it considerably more difficult. He strained to look without the mirror, but couldn't see much. "Looks good to me," he lied, tugging his pants back up. "Great," the heavily tattooed teenager replied as he motioned for Clancy to climb up on the table. Clancy did as instructed, but the kid pointed down at Clancy's pants. Unsure, he glanced down and then back up to figure out what the problem was. "You'll need to take your suit off." "Oh," Clancy realised, reaching down under him to unhook his belt and pull the slacks past his bottom. "Better?" "Sure," the unenthusiastic kid offered as he reached over to get his machine. Unsure of what to expect, Clancy tried to stay as still as he could, starting to wonder if he should have brought someone with him. But this was something he was doing for himself, and no one else would understand. He was alone in this world, and he would never forget that. The machine started whirring, and Clancy breathed out, remembering the blog he had read of tips for your first tattoo. "Remember to breathe," it had read. How could anyone forget to breathe? But here he was, clenching up and forgetting to breathe all at once. The tip of the needle ripped into his skin, and it hurt about as much as he was expecting. After a moment, the pain shifted into something he could only describe as scratching a 3-day-old sunburn. "Shit," he gasped as he gripped the edge of the little bench. "You alright?" "Yeah, I'm good." Clancy started looking at the designs on the wall to distract himself. "Oops. Oops? What's oops? Oops isn't the thing you want to hear from your tattoo artist." "Just a little spill," the kid mumbled as he rolled his chair backwards to frantically grab towels. "Spill?" He tried to look. "All good, please be still." The artist didn't say anything else until he was done nearly 40 minutes later, and instructed Clancy to stand and take a look. Clancy's butt had long gone numb, and he was surprised how little he felt. He shuffled in small steps to the mirror due to his pants wrapped around his ankles, and ran into the same problem as before, backwards letters and all. "Here," he started, handing over his cell phone. "Can you take a picture so I can see it better?" The artist stood back and snapped a few pictures of Clancy's ass before holding the phone close so he could see. It was there, clear as day. Carpe diem, spread wide across his entire butt, 1 word per cheek. "Perfect," Clancy declared, delighted at the idea, knowing that this was the punch in the dick his life needed to get back on track. It's all uphill from here. All uphill for sure. The end. Thank you, Samantha. What I want to do before we get into the critique on this is to share what Samantha shared in the explanation field.
Oh, yeah.
Because it gives a little bit more context to what she was going for. Now, I don't necessarily think people need to do this, but we had it in this case, so let's run with it. Samantha said, "I wanted to use the idea of a cliche on a base level of the main character getting a very cliche tattoo and push it a little, with him being over the top with this being his first tattoo and the attitude of the artist being a bit of a cliche as well." Mm-hmm. So we're going for like the artist cliche, yeah, yep. And the situational cliche and the cliche tattoo. So we're just really hammering it. So brave move there to go. Any one of those would have been enough, but I get it. So we've got all of those. And in fact, it was one of the few, I think, well, not few, but that used the cliche of a type of character.
Yeah.
Apart from the detectives and maybe the mothers. It was an interesting one, a unique one. We didn't see any other tortured artists in there.
I think it's quite good, actually, because it's neither a cliche phrase or a literary cliche. It's more of a social cliche. It's a real life cliche, but not necessarily one that you pick up a book and, oh, here's another story about someone who's getting a tattoo.
Exactly.
So it's a kind of a cliche that doesn't rub you the wrong way when you're reading a story.
Mm.
So the story opens, it was hard for Clancy to tell in the mirror what the words really looked like because they were backwards, and that made it considerably more difficult. He strained to look without the mirror, but couldn't see much. So, look, I think as an opening, I felt that the same thing was being said.
Yeah,
maybe
few
3 times. So it was hard for Clancy to tell in the mirror what the words really looked like. Is what you're trying to say.
That's the statement, yep.
Because they were backwards and that made it considerably more difficult is a repetition of the fact that it's difficult. And then the second sentence is he strained to look without the mirror but couldn't see much. So still he can't see.
So we need to tighten that right up.
Yes.
And that's totally doable.
Yep.
And I think maybe the reason why it's been repeated there is to kind of set it up and almost deliver the punchline, almost in that first little section. Like, why is he looking? We're setting up that he's looking at something, and then we're not fully, but somewhat explaining that. And I'm not sure that that really adds value here yet, because we reveal about the tattoo a little bit later on, and I don't think it needs to be done. You can leave that question hanging until we find out it's a tattoo. That's fine. I don't think that's one of those questions that would be too much, because it is explained.
To be clear to the readers, because you're not looking at the words, carpe diem is misspelt.
Yes,
so that's the fact that he's looking in the mirror and he can't read the words properly is setting that up. And the vibe I got from Clancy in this story was nihilistic. or depressive because he says he's all alone in this world and he will never forget that. And he's kind of going into this scenario not really caring what he gets tattooed onto him or what it looks like. And I found myself reading through the story wanting to understand the character of Clancy better, because I think that's really what we want to know as a reader is not just the things that happen here, and it is a comedic story, but why is he there? Who is he? Is he doing this in response to something? You know, like you said about Post Malone, who hurt you is basically what we want to know. Like, why does no one like you? There's something there that I think we could get more, we could squeeze a little bit more out of that character and understand why they're there and develop that emotional connection with the character.
I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that this was intended to be a comedic story.
Oh, yeah.
Because the punchline is there of the misspelled tattoo.
Yeah.
However, I would say I didn't experience it as a comedic story. Honestly, on first reading, I wondered if that was a typo of Carpe Diem rather than getting that that's the punchline of the joke. And maybe that just
it's a tone
reflects
thing, right?
on me. But yes, it was the tone. The tone wasn't there. And because Clancy doesn't react to the misspelled, because nobody reacts, we're left as a reader going, hang on, is that what I think it is? I'm not sure. And so therefore, as a punchline, it doesn't work because there's no punch to me. Like, where's the ha-ha moment of like, oh, Clancy got served, you know, you got the wrong tattoo. Honestly, I have to hate Clancy for that to be funny, because if that happened to a friend of mine, I'd be upset for, well, no, it'd be pretty fucking funny if my friend got the wrong tattoo. But yeah, and the tone's quite, as you say, like a bit depressive.
Yeah.
You know, like what's he doing there? And he's kind of just going along with it, not invested in the tattoo whatsoever. So, I mean, to some extent, that kills the payoff too, because like that kills the punchline. If he doesn't really care about it, look at it. Like, who cares if it's misspelled? Let's say it. What was your favourite bit? We know. Come on, it was my favourite bit too. The punch prompt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely like the punch in the dick. I mean, I think I just knocked it up like an extra point just for that line.
Totally, same. I mean, we are coming across as just completely...
No, it's great to read something that is just out there.
Yeah, like, and it's funny. Like, if you're going for comedic tone, that works. And honestly, I know a Clancy who deserves a punch in the dick. But not in... Like, we're taking it in a good way here, like getting your life back on track. Anyway, we won't go into that, but that delivered comedic effect.
Yeah. In fact, that's the note I have to myself here on the page is punch in the dick is great. I wish the whole piece had been written in that tone.
For sure. And if you're setting Clancy up as this guy's like, oh, this is what my life really needs, as opposed to like, oh, whatever. If he's like, oh, I'm going in here and it seize the day, right? Or pluck the day, we should say. Yeah. He's plucking the day, if you will, but he's not. He's just there. He's like, should I have brought someone? Nah, no, who cares? Like, oh, I'm going to sit here for 40 minutes and it hurts a little bit, but whatever. And then like, oh, yeah, cool, tattoo. No, let's set him up. Why is he here? Like, as you said, who hurt you? Why are you here? Who are you proving wrong with this tattoo? You know, what's it going to achieve for you once you've got this tattoo? How are you going to feel? Let's set all that up. And then when it's delivered as the wrong spelling, especially the wrong spelling of seize the day or pluck the day, that's going to really like hit home.
Yeah. Okay, so moving through, there's the scene where after he's looked in the mirror, he says, looks good to me, pulls his pants up, and then the heavily tattooed teenager says, great. And there's a few more lines after this as well before the kid grabs a machine, and it almost feels like Samantha is trying to kind of hide the fact that this is a tattoo parlor and that's what's happening. You need to just put that out there.
Yeah.
Like, there's a tattoo happening.
We're here. Let's drop us in. Sam is hoping to set something up with a payoff here, but I don't think it's the right thing to set up. And I think that's something that would be much better dealt with quickly. And look, drop us in the scene with an evocative detail about the place. Like, you're just talking about a machine.
Yes.
And like, there's just this kid, like, show me. I want to be there. Like, yes, this is just a bit of a comedic story, but drop me into the scene really quickly. And I think it'll be more satisfying.
A great way of establishing character as well is to pluck out the aspects of the scene, of the surroundings that would be noticed by the character, because then you get an insight into the kind of things that he's noticed. Maybe he's a guy who's in a suit who's traditionally uptight, and now he's decided to take a new turn in his life and seize the day and be spontaneous, and that's why he's there. And he comes in and he notices how like seedy everything is, or that the person who's about to do that tattoo has some weird piercing or implant or something. And so the description that he's chosen, and we talked about choosing from the last story we read, the little piece about pronunciation of the word Sunday, the description of the tattoo artist is heavily tattooed teenager. And I think that that could be improved to be something that is more evocative, more something that Clancy himself will notice.
Gives us a view of him through what you are choosing to show us in the scene, but effectively what him as the point of view character, what he is choosing to show us in that scene. And I think that comes back to the Poe's single effect theory again, right? What details are you choosing to show us? And think about that. So we've got a heavily tattooed, bored, unenthusiastic teenager. Why?
Yep.
That could be anyone, right? Yep. And you can use that. You've only got 500 words. You can use your tattoo artist to, again, show us more, like the contrast between the tattoo artist and Clancy, for example. If the tattoo artist is just bored and nothing, well, what value is he bringing? And if he's not bringing any value, stop showing him. Get him in and out super quick and show us something else. Yeah. You know, we don't need to keep being reminded that he's unenthusiastic because it's not telling us, well, I don't believe it's telling us anything. I mean,
maybe there's a contrast there to be made in if Clancy is highly strung and he has attention to detail, which he doesn't, but that could be something that character could have.
That's right.
And then he's seeing this teenager who's about to make some life-changing thing, something that he can't take back once it's done, it's a permanent thing. And now he's getting all stressed out about the fact that the teenager is
so flippant.
Exactly.
But he's flippant too. And there's so many ways you could take it. Like there's so many different creative choices you could have here. Maybe the tattoo artist has no tattoos. And what's that saying?
Exactly,
You know, so you can really lift your story by some really key detail. Like think about the parts in your story and make them work harder. Like you've only got 500 words. So if you're going to introduce a whole character, unless they're a walk-on character, give us them. Who are they? Introduce them and let them be a foil to your point of view character. I mean, another piece of writing advice you might hear is every character, even if they are just a walk-on character, needs a goal, even if that's just to get a glass of water, right? I think this is said normally in reference to films, but that everybody should have a reason for being, basically. And if they don't, get them out of there. So the reason for being for the tattoo artist here is that, well, he's getting a tattoo, but it's flash fiction. You don't need to necessarily mention the tattoo artist once. It can be implied. So if you're going to show them, if you're going to introduce us to a new character, make it work hard, make it give us more. And here, if you are going for a comedic effect, then contrast is probably a really good choice, or something shocking like, for example, not having any tattoos yourself. Yeah. Like these are ways to explore comedy in our reaction from our main character to his environment.
So the next line, the machine started whirring and Clancy breathed out, remembering the blog he had read of tips for your first tattoo. Remember to breathe, it had read. How could anyone forget to breathe? But here he was, clenching up and forgetting to breathe all at once. This is really the first time where we know for sure that he's in a tattoo parlor. So, and secondly, I think this is actually a great place to start the story because what's come before that is a little bit of chit-chat with the tattoo artist. And there is that moment in the mirror, but that also could come afterwards, or it could be referenced.
I think we need it. Like that piece seems to be required.
That's right. But what I like about this is the machine started whirring, Clancy breathed out, remembering the blog he had read about getting a tattoo. That's a great way of saying where you are without being direct and saying Clancy was getting a tattoo. You know, you're establishing who the character is, the fact that he's getting a tattoo, the fact that he's getting his first tattoo, the fact that he's nervous about it. So he's been on blogs reading about it. That sets up so many things about the character, and it comes about halfway through the story. And that really should come at the front of the story.
Yeah. For sure. That's definitely an excellent show, don't tell moment, where so much is being delivered in a way that's engaging rather than just having to bullet points, let me tell you a little bit about Clancy kind of thing. One challenge any flash fiction writer has is never having enough words. And so I think as, in a competition entrant myself, sometimes you think, oh, well, that's nice. Sure, I'll tell you more about Clancy, but he only gave me 500 words, right? And that's a totally valid point to make, I think. But at the same time, this story shows potential for things that could go in favor of things that are saying more. So some of that repetition that we mentioned, some of the interaction between Clancy and the tattoo artist either can go or needs to be adjusted to say more and to deliver more impact. And I think that's totally achievable within 500 words. And I would say about this story, it's an excellent choice. Again, both of these Daredevil stories were excellent choices in terms of how much to fit in a flash fiction piece. Yeah. So getting a tattoo, like that delivery of getting the wrong tattoo, that's it. Perfect amount. So then within that, it's about building greater impact with your creative choices.
Yeah.
One line I wanted to call out was, after a moment, the pain shifted into something he could only describe as scratching a 3-day-old sunburn, which is exactly what getting a tattoo feels like. So that was a good evocative piece of imagery there, I thought.
I thought so too. I've never gotten a tattoo, so I don't know what it feels like. But the sentence that preceded that, the tip of the needle ripped into his skin and it hurt about as much as he was expecting. I think that's the kind of thing where you have to think about what you're trying to say, because that doesn't say a whole lot, to say that it hurt about as much as he was expecting.
Yeah, and if you want, again, comedic story, right, an opportunity, pain.
Yeah.
Pain is huge in comedy, right? You could use that or not, but if it's going to be there, it has to be leaning into this comedic punchline, that you're trying to deliver. And if not, it doesn't need to be there.
Yep. And I think also and something that it takes a little bit of practice to work out you can do is that you don't need to describe everything that's happening in the sequence. Like you can skip bits that are clear that they're happening. Like you don't have to describe the fact that he turns up at the tattoo parlor and he has to sit down and he has to, if they're part of the story, you absolutely do, but you don't have to mention in sequence every single thing that happens.
Yeah,
it's fine to skip some.
Especially in a scene like this, which is a familiar, whether you've had a tattoo or not, you understand the sequence of events that needs to happen. So you can skip over them and our brains fill in the blanks without needing it to be spelled out, as long as it remains clear, which I think in this case, because it's a fairly straightforward interaction, it would remain clear. So I think an example, which I think we both called out, was that passage of time. So there's a line, the artist didn't say anything else until he was done nearly 40 minutes later. Now, you have sort of skipped there, right? You've skipped ahead, but in a way that took me out of the story a little bit. Like, oh, it's a bit boring. 40 minutes have passed, Why have you taken me on that boring 40 minutes? Can you make a different choice where the impact is delivered more immediately? Like maybe we need to start this story much closer to the end of the tattoo, or have that first little bit where he's looking in the mirror and then a bigger time jump without all this intervening back and forth with the tattoo artist, just sort of jump from the beginning to the end. I think that's perfectly acceptable to do that and probably the right choice in this case.
Yeah, my comment there is a good little phrase, is just to start the sentence with when he had finished. When he'd finished, he instructed Clancy, because then you know what's just happened. You don't have to say that 40 minutes have passed.
Yeah, for sure. I would say too, from the prompts perspective, right? I would say punch in the dick, great. Yep. Tick, 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 right? Maybe one of my faves. And then the anti-prompt I thought was great. Like maybe it's overkill. You could argue it's overkill to sort of be going at it from all these angles, but I never felt like it was too much. It wasn't a cliche story. I mean, it was and it wasn't. So I thought that was handled elegantly and one of the better handlings of the cliche prompt as well. But when it came to the spill prompt, it really did feel shoehorned in. Yeah. And I understand that, right? Like you're trying to juggle too many balls here. You've got a lot already that you're trying to achieve. You're trying to get this cliche thing, which in this case is quite complex. You're trying to balance a whole bunch of different cliche elements elegantly. And then you're also throwing in punch, although I felt like that was fine. That slipped in. But yeah, the spill of, and I'm not even sure what it was, ink, blood. It's not clear.
Yeah.
And it's devoted quite a bit of dialogue to that. And I don't know that dialogue added value. Like you could have just gone, whoops, spilled something and then moved straight on. Whereas you've drawn our attention to it, but not really then delivered much with that spill. Like it didn't have a purpose except maybe make him a bit more fearful.
What he could have done is spilt the ink on the template that he was writing from, like the Carpe Diem template. Yep. And now he couldn't see the letters and he had to go from memory and he didn't know how to spell it. So there are
ways of making it fit the story. Honestly, this is probably work that needs to be done before you write the story so that you can shape the story to do that. Unless you love editing, you might, for example, start the story a bit differently with spilled ink instead, and therefore that sort of changes the trajectory of your story a little bit. Maybe he spills ink during the process and then gets distracted and that's why he makes the error. Like, I mean, tattoos are done on the basis of typically it's drawn on the skin or printed on the skin first, so the template should be there. But yeah, I felt like that could have been done a little bit more elegantly.
Yeah. So this is another story that I had commented about potential and rated it, fairly highly in the scheme of things. And so all the things that we're talking about, you're starting from quite a good starting point, but how to elevate that story from a little bit above average to something that could shortlist or win a competition.
It's by attention to detail,
Yeah.
right? And these are the details that we're bringing out. So overall, I mean, the story's clear. We see what's happening. We get the joke. And in some ways, you've delivered what you wanted. You wanted to deliver this cliche and you've wrapped 3 cliches in one. And that's really clever. Big props for that because that's not easy to do. But again, it comes back to character, number one. And I think everybody in the comp could do more to build character and to make us care about character. And then from there, also then thinking about all the moving parts and how can that all work as a whole? Why are these parts there? Challenging each piece of your story to work hard and to say more, because those are the stories that really get our attention, the ones that every line is just hitting. Every line is giving you something more.
But you're right, and that's the process that I go through. Once I've got a draft, is print out a copy of the story and just hit it with a red pen. Like, do I need this? What am I trying to say? Is this setting up my conclusion? As you always say, kill your darlings.
Well, there's lots of steps that you can go through. I might share my little formula one day with all our listeners of what I now do after now judging the comp, what I've learned to do with my own stories that has absolutely, in my view, elevated what I'm producing. Because there are some key things that you can step through once you've got your draft. And both of these Daredevil stories, I will say, great ideas, fabulous ideas. So it's then just workshopping those and making sure you're getting the very most out of it and saying what you set out to say and us receiving that message as readers. But thanks, Samantha. That was wonderful. Good fun.
Yeah, and that was a lot of fun reading and talking about. And thank you, Emily Gray, and both of our Daredevils. Hope you enjoyed it as well, and hope you're not crying in the corner.
Please let us know how you felt about what we said.
Let us know if it's too harsh.
Is it too harsh? No, Emily Gray, please, for the love of God, I want an email. You've got to tell me what's going on in this story because I need to understand. You've piqued my curiosity here and I want some satisfaction, please. Let us know how you went. Did you struggle with the feedback? Do you understand what we're saying? Do you agree? You may not agree with everything that we've said here, and that's fine too because you're the artist at the end of the day.
All right. Drum roll. It's the moment we've all been waiting for.
Here we are. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I am. So we'll read the long list. This is going to be in no particular order. And maybe just to be clear, the long list includes the short list. So within these 40 entries, somewhere there is the short list and the winner. And so if you're on this list, could be you.
Could be you.
And if you're not on this list, you still could have been a wild card.
That's right. Exactly. So ultimately there are like 6 placeholders, I guess. We've got 1 to 4, first to fourth, and then 2 honourable mentions, which are sort of equal in estimation. And then we've got the 2 wild cards, which could have been taken from anywhere. So even if you don't appear on this list, by all means, hold out hope because you never know.
Without further ado, here are the long-listed stories. Words Left Unsaid by Liv Hibbert. As Far as the Eye Can See by Tess Allen. Stick It to the Man by Carla Connolly. All in a Day's Work by Caitlin Phillips.
Annabelle Irving by Lara Kane Gray. TGIF by Courtney Brown. Rebel Rebel by Ella McAuliffe. The Flower Duet by Fleecy Malay.
To the Ends of the World by Anna Hughes. A Bone of Contention by Sandra Tom Jones. It Never Rains But It Pours by Athena Law. A Haunting by Cleo Davidson Lynch.
Senseless Tragedy by Rachel Crane. The Way of the Bins by Bob Topping. It Goes Without Saying by Madeline Howard. The Attraction by Philippa Freegard.
A Funny Story by Dean Curry. A Love at First Sight by Jaden Christopher. Old Poisons by Frankie Seymour. Paradise by AJ Sabani.
Memory Lane by Shannon Mackey. Ashes to Ashes, Dust to Dust by Marissa Hanley. Spherical Refraction by Jacqueline Koshorst. The Weather in Erie, Pennsylvania by Matthew Peters.
Exposure by Anna Lois Barth. The Early Bird Catches the Worm by Anne Wilkins. Everything in Australia is Trying to Kill You by Timothy Hayes. The Circle of Life by The Wayward Scribe.
The Harricot Calico or Cat Got Your Tongue by Sam James. Float Like a Butterfly by Katie Chalice. A Bun in the Oven by Zelda C. Thorne. Magic by Melissa Stegall.
Bless This Mess by Chad Frame. Tethered by Kat Haberman. Whispers by Trey Dowell. 5 days late is better than forever by Sarah Hurd.
Like a Moth to a Flame by Cams and Claire. 2 Buckets and a Rope by Tom Brodkin. Funeral Rites by Patrick Moon. And last but not least, Salt of the Earth by Karen Matani. So a huge congratulations if you made the list. Well done. And commiserations if you didn't. But as we said, the standard was really good. So could have been something small between you and the list. Yeah. But for our contenders, for those of you who made the list, I hope you find a way to celebrate, because the writing life can be tough, and so that little bit of validation that we hope we've provided to you, we hope you celebrate that because it's worth it. So think about it. How will you celebrate? It's exciting to long list. And, if you didn't make the long list, how are you going to commiserate? I know our favourite way of commiserating is just absolutely shitting all over the winners. So feel free to do that when the time comes. But yeah, again, remember, you might still be in contention for the wild card. And nevertheless, we hope you'll join us for the next episode to hear, who won and who made the shortlist, because there's some wonderful stories in there that you will enjoy hearing, I'm sure. Also, there's a little something that we've been hinting at that we're cooking up for the winner. So we're looking forward to revealing what the winner will get in addition to their prize money when we announce that in a week's time.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
So jump on the forum, congratulate each other, accept the glowing praise and congratulations from your fellow Not Quite writers.
And so the next you'll hear from us is going to be the shortlist episode in about a week's time. And past that, we'll be back to our regular programming for a little while and getting ready for the next comp.
So yeah, if you've had a good time, if you've learned something, if you've enjoyed the ride, we hope you'll join the ride again next time, because we have fun reading your stories and we appreciate every single one of you for participating. And, stick it to us. If you didn't make the long list, come back. Listen to the advice given on the podcast today. Come back guns blazing next time around. We want to see it.
And if you're still listening, thank you for sticking with us, because I'm sure this is a really long episode. We'll see what comes out in the edit. But I think we've been talking for 4.5 hours at this point. So there's quite a lot of content here, and hopefully it's been valuable for you. So until next time, when we reveal our shortlist and our winner, right on.
Right on.
Thank you for listening to Not Quite Right. If you'd like to reach us via email or follow us on social media, you can find all the links on our website, notquiterightpodcast.com. That's WRITE. And if you enjoyed the show, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcasting app.
Something doesn't seem quite right.
Oh, I'm turning into a Karen. Help. I'm turning into a bloody perimenopausal fucking psychopath is what I'm turning into.
One could argue that turning into is not needed in that sentence.
I did not purchase the Daredevil package. Fuck off.